Never made calculation projects on this use. Listen to a podcast again. Churchill. I love Churchill. We shaped the
Yes.
Yeah. And all like
That's right. That's terrible. That's what they think. Everyone thinks something good.
well, exactly. If we let someone so more serious, we saw it out. What comes next? It's not terrifying.
And what you they don't I think it's a lot like the syndrome after the first world. Somewhat unfairly, but also trying to make something so many of them. I think when I think about Harold and like Harold and survive. It's always best.
Test.
And I think there's a lot of paralysis. Because
Oh.
Nothing gets done. But you know, I think that's not right.
yeah,
Thinking about
I remember that.
accident towards its position.
So, everything.
Are they?
Okay.
And
I was crazy.
Well,
Yeah.
people come in here.
Or it's just got
like,
no, James is going to have a few minutes late, so we'll just be at ease. We'll wait on him. I just got to know that James is late.
I just saw him.
Oh, you did?
You know,
Oh, right. Caught himself.
Just this.
Yeah.
Somehow
it's okay.
So are we straight?
Yeah,
I believe so. Got past the technical issue.
right.
Just get it.
There's always something, right, Lawrence? Usually.
City of Charleston, Utah. Show me sense.
And now it's like this about how the students are ruin everything.
Yeah.
Finding that here means
Really?
oh, here we go.
I gotta, once you get hit on the channel, I find you don't have much trouble.
Okay, we're live.
That's what I'll come down to.
Yeah.
No. It's well. That's right. So I think maybe. How about you? Yeah, you all caught up.
No, in fact,
You're all caught up with me.
Yeah, I remember, and when I saw that, I remember that. I'm easy to use there. I don't get that shit. You know what it's like in my organization? It's like
You mean the cover red?
you're trying to make it.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah. I don't think you can turn it because that's the architect. Reviewing it. It's right there. It's 12 years. Maybe they just something that's not.
James, we're ready to do everything. But you did it, you got late. Thank you. It wasn't too crazy. See, a hush has descended on the room. Everyone's ready to proceed, I gather. Welcome to the January 11th, 2023 BAR large in-person meeting at the Lenny Krawcheck Room at 2 George Street. My name is John Robinson. I'm chairman for this evening. I'm joined by my fellow board members Lou Sobchuk, James Metters, Stephen Brown, Eddie Bello, who's our alternate since Mr. J. White cannot be here this evening, city architect Tory Parrish, assistant city architect Lawrence Gordon. The order of the meeting will be as follows. For those of you who are not familiar with the format, there will first be an introduction of the agenda item by city staff or Tory for the board and for the benefit of the public. This is followed by an application presentation by the applicant on each of the individual agenda item. That is confined to a 10-minute time limit unless extensions are granted by the chair. Extensions may be asked for either at the beginning or as you need them. I'll politely remind you of your time if it is expired. That presentation is followed by any questions that of the applicant at that time for board or staff. Any and all presenters appearing as applicants tonight should clearly state their name and what their affiliation with the project is, be they the architect, owner, developer, or other affiliate. The applicant is to speak during this period rather than ensuing periods, unless requested by board or staff for questions, clarification, or other statements. This is followed by written public comment. Since 2021, it has been the policy of this board to digest written comment in advance and only read it into the record as necessary. That's really for the benefit of the public to save them time. All written comments for tonight's proceeding were due at noon yesterday. And they've been transmitted to the board member in a spreadsheet, and we've all considered those for purposes of our deliberations. This written public comment is followed by a public comment for those of you joining us this evening in person. This is a friendly reminder that for all public comment, after all presenters, there's a 2-minute time limit, and the person making the comment should state their name and address for the record. Additionally, this is a reminder to our public applicants who've perhaps not been with us before and maybe don't have familiarity with how we've done things recently. It's very important for the purposes of this board and its deliberation, South Carolina's Administrative Procedures Act and other reasons, for the comments that are made and considered by the board to be related to architecture. And this is a friendly reminder that comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, or other livability concerns, are not the purview of this board because they're in the purview of things like the planning board or the board of zoning appeals or the technical review committee. This is a friendly reminder to all of our guests this evening to please silence cell phones or other potentially disruptive devices. The public comment period is followed by city staff comments and recommendations. The city will walk us through a summary of what they have found and what their suggestions to the board are. This is then followed by an applicant response period of up to 5 minutes if the applicant elects to use it, to not do another presentation, but instead to clarify any erroneous information, be there or disagreements with the observations of city staff or any public comments. This period is then followed by board discussion and a potential vote. At this point, the applicant presentation and public comment is closed. The applicant may further clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising your hand. In terms of our agenda, we have withdrawn agenda item number 3, which is 295 Calhoun Street. That will presumably be presented at our next regular meeting. For the benefit of the public, information on each application, including the documents submitted, as well as the result of each of our deliberations, is available at charleston-sc.gov/BAR. We are being streamed live by YouTube, and everyone here is consenting to have that information digitally stored. Just a reminder for future use, public written comment was due noon the day before any of our meetings. The public may submit public comments by doing the citizen participation form at innovate.charleston-sc.gov or by calling and leaving a message, which will be transcribed at 843-724-3781, or by delivering your comments by mail to 2 George Street, Charleston, SC 29441. Further reminder for the benefit of the applicants and my fellow board members, everyone who's presenting has been required to register in advance and have submitted all the documents that we will see tonight in advance. Those things that were not submitted will not be considered by the board. I've covered the public meeting format and the fact that we're being recorded and the protocols for delivering written comments. This is a reminder to my fellow board members. Board members will be polled by myself for comments and potentially for a vote on each motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. And more importantly, if I have misread and misspoken with the motions, which sometimes are elaborate around here, you should feel free to correct that motion so that it is entered into the record correctly. With that, Ms. Parrish, I believe we have agenda item number 1, approval of our previous meeting minutes. Can I entertain a motion from the board to approve the minutes of our last regular meeting? Okay, is there a second? Okay, Mr. Brown. Mr. Bello, how do you vote on this?
In favor.
Mr. Brown? Yea in favor. Mr. Metters? Ms. Sojak? And myself, yea in favor. Takes care of that. Agenda item number 2, Ms. Parrish.
Item number 2 is 3380 Ashley River Road. This is Miss Sally's cottage at Drayton Hall. It is not rated as constructed in 1985. The reason it's before you tonight is because it is in the landmark overlay district. And the landmark overlay, well, I'll get to this in a moment, but Watkins, I'm going to move to, actually, no, I'll just read this now. Sorry, so this is what's constructed in 1985, and I'll bring it to your attention that it is in the landmark overlay. We're required to bring landmark overlay properties to the Board of Architecture for review, no matter the visibility. And so that's why it's before you. In addition, you are to utilize the criteria of the Old and Historic District. Okay, now that I bubbled through that. Ashley River Road, Drayton Hall. Showing you where this is on the property. This is the cottage. The work that we'll be looking at is on the other side. Okay, Mr. Keys.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, James.
if there was no one in the audience in opposition to this application and no one on the board that's in opposition to this application, I have a motion.
Sure. Is there anyone in the public with us this evening that wishes to comment on this agenda item, either pro or con, besides Mr. Keys, who I think is very much in the pro? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Metters. Mr. Keys, unless you feel obligated, okay. Mr. Metters, you had a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve this application with final details to staff.
Okay. Your motion is for approval
Yes.
of the infill as proposed. Yes. Final review by staff. Yes. Okay.
Mr. Metters, first of all, I appreciate you doing that. It's better than I was going to do it. Can I ask, I don't think it matters to me if staff reviews the final details because I'm historic. I have full confidence in Mr. Keys. I would be happy with approving it. Going for final approval, special interest permit without staff review unless there's an issue with staff.
I'd like to keep it with final details to staff. But I mean, it is not coming back to us.
Yeah, no, I understand. I was just trying to help. Streamline for that.
Yep, thank you.
And so did you want to make a formal amendment, or are you okay with
Well, I
Mr.
don't think
Metters?
he's going to accept it, so I'll just
That's
vote
what I
in
thought
favor of that.
Oh, you can second his motion?
I will second it.
Thank you, Mr. Bello. The motion is in proper order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on this item?
Yea in favor.
Ms. Sojak?
Yeah.
Mr. Bello?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Metters?
Jake,
And myself, yea in favor. And just for the benefit of the public, the historic overlay zone is interesting because it goes lots of places in the county and the city that you might not think it goes, such as Cane Hoy and also out on Ashley River Road. So while our review is perfunctory because it's not a historic structure, there's a good reason we have to approve it, which is it often touches on some very important historic structures. Thank you to Mr. Keys.
Thank you.
Good evening. Agenda item number 3.
Agenda item number 3 has been deferred.
Oh, excuse me. Agenda item number 4.
This one is 15 Radcliffe Street. This one is requesting final approval for the relocation of the residents at 15 Radcliffe Street to 128 St. Philip Street. This one is Category 4 in Radcliffe Borough. Was constructed between 1890 and 1905 and is in the Old and Historic District. Showing you right where it is on Radcliffe Street with St. Philip to the left running perpendicular. This is the structure today. This is the front elevation facing north. Elevation. West. This is an image of the address, the relocation site on St. Philip Street. It would be between the yellow house and the building on the right. That's the proposed relocation site. Again, showing the new location. We'll have Mr. Schmidt present this one.
Mr. Schmidt, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Joe Schmidt of Schmidt Architects. We last presented this on August 10th of this year. Just to do the briefest overview of it, this is a house totally surrounded by an asphalt parking lot that was created by the Collins family when they demolished about 15 houses over a period of time to create their parking lot. Mr. Brumley had the opportunity for the first time ever that the house was up for sale. It had been held by the family in trust for years and years and years. Hasn't been occupied in about 10 years, was quite dilapidated, and a court order forced the sale of the property. I suggested to Mr. Brumley that he purchase the house. I've always loved the house. I'd like to see the house restored. In that location, it is not economically feasible to restore it and expect it to recover your money or a family to want to live in that type of situation. And he's not in the business of buying houses and moving them around either. But at the same time, I said, we have a place on site that we could accommodate this house, put it back in a residential context, actually get your money back for the house, for the purchase of the house, and restore it and put it back on the market and for resale. So that's where we went to in the last hearing. The question came up was a preservation plan required? We agreed to have a preservation plan put together. We hired Kim Lavin, who was here. Frank Brumley also was here, by the way, and gave her a generous amount of time to do this and do all the research possible. She did a very extensive preservation plan report on the property, and that we're back to the BO now for that to be. There's really no change from anything that we said prior. The intent is to have the house moved. We've contacted house movers. They have said this is a very movable house, no structural issues with being able to do that. We don't even go out on the street. We're going diagonally across the parking lot. They're set and ready to go. When we get permission to do this, we will engage engineers who will design the foundations for it, get them built, then have the house moved, and then immediately start renovating the house to put it back together. And as I understand, might go to BAR small at that point. That's something that was on the table. But at any rate, my goal is to know whether this is going to be moved, so we know that it can be saved and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Did you have anyone else you wanted to present?
We can go through the drawings and so forth,
That's
but that
okay.
really wasn't what was on the table.
I'll ask for the modification of the board. Any questions of Mr. Schmidt at this time?
I have one minor question, Joe. Are you able to move the chimney?
They have given us a proposal to move it with and without the chimney. Kim has addressed that in her report, that it could come down and be put back, whichever makes more sense, which is actually whichever's safer for the house, because the chimney apparently was toppled in Hurricane Hugo, so it's not even the original chimney that's up there. So we will go however that one, the chimney will be coming back.
That'll
One
be
way or the other.
the next review.
Correct.
And that's the chimney above the roof line, the chimney within the structure
The
itself.
chimney is the side of the structure.
Right. You can see it.
Any other questions from the board for Mr. Schmidt at this time? Seeing none, thank you. As I said before, written comment has been considered. We know that there were a number on this agenda item. With that, we will open the floor to members of the public. Brief and friendly reminder, 2-minute limit. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. James Doyle, 8 Radcliffe Place. I am the Vice President of the Radcliffe Neighborhood Association. I'll use the term RNA after that. RNA has discussed, and approved the following comments. First, respectfully, RNA requests that VAR Lodge recuse themselves from this matter. City Ordinance 54-233 is quite clear. VAR Small has jurisdiction for structures up to 10,000 square feet. The only exception to the ordinance is for demolition. 2 meetings ago, in response to a board question, I believe it was Mr. Metters, about jurisdiction, staff rep answered, "We've always done it that way when there is a larger issue." RNA's response to that thinking is, we now have 2 VARs. Good governance requires that policy trump practice. Second, RNA is in favor of saving the house as is. That means its current location. Movement, we support movement if necessary to save the house. This is not an idle comment based on the unique character of the house, plus the fact that the 2 houses owned by the applicant and adjacent to the intended move site are poorly maintained college rentals. Third, everyone here should fess up to the fact that there's a larger unspoken issue at hand. It's the only reason for moving the house. Let me be clear that RNA is against construction of a parking garage on that property.
And Mr. Doyle, as you heard me recite earlier, those comments cannot be considered here.
Yes,
We have
sir.
to consider the merits of the moving of the home alone.
That's
I
correct.
know that's tough, a hard concept to understand in a vacuum. When we, as a board, deliberate on demolition or moving of structure, we have to remind ourselves of those rules. But nonetheless, thank you for your presentation on behalf of the Neighborhood Association. Further public comments on this agenda?
I've never done this, but I'm Abby Leslie. I live at 42 Orange Street, and some of my kids. And I just wanted to say, while I would definitely support saving this house and restoring it, if that's the only option, but I do love that that one street breaks up, or that one house breaks up the street, and it makes it more pedestrian friendly. If it was gone, it would be a totally different feel walking down that street. I walk down that street multiple times a day, take my kids to school, and I just oppose moving it because I don't really think there's
Thank you, Ms. Leslie. That was fine. Further public comment on this agenda item?
My name is Philip Rhodes. I reside at 28 Orange Street. I'm a member in good standing, also of the Radcliffe Neighborhood Association. I would love to see this house preserved, but I'm here to ask you not to move it for some of the following reasons. We have had an opportunity to read the preservation plan prepared that accompanies these slides. And the examples of other move projects cited are projects with significant public benefit, like this Gilliard Center or the Septima Clark Parkway. This doesn't offer that at all. It has nothing, no public benefit is to be derived from the moving of this house. Within that same document, the preservation plan prepared by the bar staff, it doesn't go into any of the detail about what resulted in this house's island-like circumstance. You know, it's like the Joni Mitchell song, "Pave Paradise and Put Up a Parking Lot," right? How did this house come to be surrounded by a parking lot? That it says the houses were lost. Well, they weren't lost. Somebody knocked them down. It's not like they just disappeared one night. A whole series of bad decisions led to the circumstances that this house now faces. And unfortunately, but truthfully, they are part of the fabric of the city of Charleston. The closing of that document states that ethical standards revolve around the loss of context. Okay, well, context exists. Some family lived in that house as long as they could until one by one, or apparently all at once in the night, all their neighbors got raptured or something and they were surrounded by a parking lot. That's part of the story of Charleston. That's part of what we're here to preserve. It's not the nice part, but that house, as it is every bit of as deserving of preservation in its location as the Aiken Red House or the Nathaniel Russell House. Those are just pretty ones, and they tell a prettier story in some ways. This house is part of the fabric of the city of Charleston. Okay, lastly, and respectfully to you, sir, the concluding pages of the document I will quote from state, on August 10th, the new owners sought city permission to relocate the house to permit the construction of a large parking garage on the surface lot. Now, those are not my words, so I'm technically not talking about the parking garage. The document that was provided for your meeting is talking about the parking garage. So there it is. Yeah. Are we talking about context or are we not? We can talk about the context, but we can't talk about the new context. It just doesn't make sense to divorce these two projects from one another. And again, respectfully, that cannot actually be done. Want to review some of the bar policy statements that are supposed to guide decision making. The buildings of Charleston provide a physical record of their time and place and use. Changes that create a false sense of historical development obscure that record and are not to be encouraged. The next one, many of Charleston's buildings have evolved over time. Changes to a property that have acquired historic significance in their own right should be retained and preserved. Number 3, it's important to maintain the historic fabric of Charleston as much as possible. Well, like it or not, a house surrounded by a parking lot is part of the mid to late 20th century history of Charleston. And another aspect of that presentation that was written and prepared, the home's original owner, prior to Mr. Brumley owning the site, he said he wanted to live in it. So all this talk about no one wants to live in the house, you can just throw that right out the window because the man who owned the house before Mr. Brumley intended to come back and live in it before his death. So that just doesn't hold water. It's a nice house. It gets sunlight from both sides. It has enough room for off-street parking. All of those are desirable, highly desirable qualities in a downtown business. Lastly, I would just like to say specifically to you, Mrs. Sochuk, the last time this came up, I believe, if I heard you correctly, that you lamented the fact that so many developers weren't coming forward with plans for houses. You know, we need more housing. You said that you rarely see plans for houses. That's what I would love to see. This house, where it is, flanked by other houses that can be occupied by people who live in the neighborhood, who work in the neighborhood, contribute to the neighborhood and to the city. But if not, the historical context of this house is abundantly clear in its present location. So therefore, please do not.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Mr. Rhodes, by the way, what do you do for a living?
Well, do you want to know the God's truth? I was laid off at the start of the pandemic, and I'm still trying to figure that out.
I was going to give you a compliment, which I've given to some other people who presented before us, which was that you would have made a great appellate lawyer.
Oh, well. So, my parents always told me that I would argue with So they call me neighbor now. Thank you.
Thank you. Further members of the public?
Hello. I too have never done this before, and neither has who I'm accompanied by, but I am a current resident at a college rental, so I know I'm not necessarily going to oppose your, sorry. I'm Charlotte Fitzsimmons. I'm at 122 St. Philip, the yellow house.
I'm Reagan Gregory. If you go back a few slides to the picture of the map overhead, we are that house right next door. So that's why we're here today.
Yes. So I don't know if it's appropriate to ask questions. Are we allowed to ask questions, or is this just for comments?
It's really intended for comments, but if you tell me the nature of the question, we might be able to figure out how to best to address that. Can't really address it to the applicant. We might be able to address it to staff, but ask the question and we'll see if we can help.
It's just about the scheduling of the move, of how prolonged is it going to be and how disruptive is it going to be for the people who already live there.
So I will let the applicant address that in their response period if they care to. They have applicant response period, and they'll cover that down the road. I'll ask that they ask that later. Okay. Any other comments?
Yes. When we moved in 2 years ago, we're also accompanied by a future resident as well. So I have a dog, and when we moved in, the fence alignment, the Warren parking lot was removed. And so,
And the Warren parking lot is where this house is supposed to be moved to. So to be totally clear, our driveway where we have to park our cars and our backyard that we already paid for, and as far as we know, rent that part of the property, the fence we're talking about.
yes. And so I use it for my dog. It's a place for her to go out, and it was removed upon move-in, and we had asked for it to be put back up because we signed a lease knowing that that fence would be there and that backyard would be of our use. So we're concerned that that fence is once going to get removed again when the house is relocated, and we would like to get it in a spot if that's going to happen, because that will.
Very good. Anything else?
Thank you.
I think we can get the applicant to respond in some fashion to that. Thank you for your presentation. Further public comments? Ms. Minigan. Ms. Minigan, beat you by just a second. I'll come to you next.
Sure. Erin Madigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would like to reiterate our opposition to the request to relocate the historic residence at 15 Radcliffe Street. While we appreciate the detailed preservation plan compiled by the applicant, the cultural significance of the building associated with Charleston's African American history, in addition to the risk relocation poses to diminishing its historic integrity and precluding its eligibility for National Register designation, are reasons to retain the building in place. Further, this is the last vestige of the historic streetscape that has otherwise been erased, and we've heard very clearly from the community that there is strong value for preserving the residence in its current location. Therefore, we urge the board to deny the request in favor of the applicant rehabilitating and integrating the building into a sensitive redevelopment plan for the site.
Thank you, Ms. Milligan. Yes, ma'am.
May I speak for myself?
Certainly.
Thank you. My name is Julie Skinner. I'm at 18 Radcliffe Street. I'm directly diagonal from the corner of Radcliffe and St. Philip Street. Just across the street is 15 Radcliffe Street. So I'm speaking from an extremely personal point of view. I have many reasons for speaking out against the relocation of 15 Radcliffe Street, but I only have time to mention a few. By far, the most compelling and most important reason is history and preservation of 15 Radcliffe Street, where it stands and should remain. I was pleasantly surprised when I learned that there has been research on this diamond rough. But sadly, if 15 Radcliffe Street is relocated, it will be forgotten after it is tucked away somewhere else, almost out of sight. The history would literally be moved out of the way and forgotten because it is currently an inconvenient obstacle. And according to Mr. Rung and Mr. Schmidt, it should just simply be moved. For the past 20 years, I have lived just a couple hundred feet away from 15 Radcliffe Street. Also, my business is located on Warren Street, so my perspective comes from a personal and a business perspective. So tonight, I would like to express that I passionately oppose the relocation of 15 Radcliffe Street. A few months ago, my husband and I and a handful of others whose homes directly border the block of St. Philip's between Warren and St. Philip Street, Warren and Radcliffe Street, sorry, were asked to attend a meeting with Mr. Brumley and his architect, Mr. Schmidt. During that meeting in August, Mr. Brumley and Mr. Schmidt discussed their proposed plan, if approved, to relocate 15 Radcliffe Street, and also discussed their possible future desired plans for the vacant lot at 15 Radcliffe Street after the house is relocated, if approved. We both strongly and passionately expressed our opposition to their plans and reasons why. Apparently, our pleas to them to forego their plans fell on deaf ears, as Mr. Brumley and Mr. Schmidt continued with their plans and their future intentions and proceeded to file an application for relocation. The application that day was all too familiar due to previous conversations and an application submitted to the VAR Mr. Brumley's plans to relocate 2 properties on St. Philip Street 7 or 8 years ago or so. We should all be asking ourselves why Mr. Brumley and Mr. Schmidt are so determined to collect and move houses on that block. As Mr. Brumley put it to us in detail at that meeting, it is part of his estate planning. That was quite a statement and reason he gave to relocate. However, I think everyone here knows what the real elephant in the room really is. Just before that meeting in August, my husband and I learned about the history of Radcliffe Street. Fast forwarding to yesterday, January 10th, my husband and I attended a public site visit along with a handful of other concerned Radcliffe Borough neighbors. I personally attended this informal meeting so I could listen and find a real and compelling reason why 15 Radcliffe Street should be relocated. Mr. Schmidt spoke about the poor condition of the house and the non-existent yard and very small parking space. He expressed that no one would want to live in a standalone house with no yard. I find that hard to believe, as desirable as it is to live in downtown Charleston. Mr. Schmidt then began to discuss the lot where 15 Radcliffe Street would be relocated to. He casually mentioned that the property lines would be moved from the property next door on St. Philip Street to give the relocated structure of 15 Radcliffe Street a yard and parking. Please keep in mind that Mr. Brumley also now owns those 2 properties that will be next to the relocated 15 Radcliffe Street structure. So my question is, if this is Mr. Schmidt's compelling reason as to why 15 Radcliffe Street should be moved, why can't Mr. Brumley change his own property lines around 15 Radcliffe Street to give it more yard and parking space where it doesn't make any sense? If you can move property lines on one of the properties he owns, why can't you move them for another?
Ms. Skinner, you might have been liberal about this. Would you like a little extension of time?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I have like 2 more paragraphs, sorry. So they're not so compelling reason or problem, in other words, would then be solved. If they could just move property lines around 15 Radcliffe Street where it currently stands to provide a yard and off-street parking. I'm still waiting to be given a real reason other than what I can. I'm still waiting to be given a real reason other than what I can't speak about today as to why 15 Radcliffe Street should be moved. Therefore, I strongly urge the members of this board to see that the history and the restoration of this home be properly preserved where it sits, because it is a far more compelling reason than Mr. Schmidt's argument of little yard space, that in which case has a very easy remedy of simply moving property lines, as Mr. Schmidt stated could be done. Please don't allow the small piece of Charleston's history to be relegated to an inconvenient obstacle on the sides of that. If it can't even survive being relocated, it will never be the same. Your decision today will be permanent and highly impactful on my family, home, and quality of life, as well as all Radcliffe Borough residents. As your decision today will pave the way for any further plans and decisions that may already be in the works after 15 Radcliffe Street becomes a vacant lot. Please let the ethics, principles, and preservation goals that the AR was founded on guide your decision tonight. In closing, this is the hardest one. I'd like to state for public record that threats or intimidation trying to sway our strong opposition will not work, will not be tolerated, and will be reported to proper authorities. Any retaliation resulting from threats against my family, property, livelihood, and my neighborhood, held accountable under the law. I will not be silenced. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Skinner. Further members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item?
My name is Annie Sitton. I live at 7 Radcliffe Place. I am just a resident with a vested interest in Charleston. My husband and I moved here because of the history and the charm. And it is slowly being chiseled away. I would like to say that the house at 15 Radcliffe Street isn't just a historic Queen Anne house built by an African American in the early 1900s in a very integrated neighborhood of immigrants in a part of town that was once called Little Jerusalem. It is a landmark, an anchor, an icon, a point of reference, a symbol of what was once there, and an opportunity to rebuild using it as the cornerstone to reflect the history and architecture and charm of Charleston as we know it, as it is known for. It doesn't take much effort to walk around Charleston or stand in front of that house and have people talk about that house. I stood in front of that house taking pictures and had people stopping me to talk about that house, to find out some history on it, to see whether or not it was going to be preserved. I was standing there chatting with someone, and a man came up to me and started talking and reminiscing about when he was little in the 60s, playing on the street with the kids who lived in that neighborhood. I was out canvassing the neighborhood with a petition that we just realized we just found out that we could carry around a petition to get names. It took us just an hour. We started this yesterday at 10:30, and we had a deadline of noon. We walked around for about an hour, and every door we stopped at, the people were very willing to sign our petition. And it took us a while to get through because everybody wanted to talk about the house. They wanted to ask questions. They wanted to give us information about it. I had one lady say, when she first came to Charleston, that was the first thing that really made an impression on her. And she used it from that point on as her focal point to find out where she was at any time. When she saw that house, she knew exactly where she was. These are things that people in this community are going to remember. This is a house that has made a huge impression on the people. And they don't even know the history. If they knew the history, they would love it even more. I was walking around the neighborhood looking at some of the small little cul-de-sacs and alleyways and little areas where there were hidden homes. And I ran into two different contractors and I talked to them about this particular house. They were very interested. When they found out that there was a possibility, just an outside possibility, that it could be, a neighborhood could be reestablished, they were just all over it. It's not going to take much effort to find developers who are very willing to develop that portion of the block. Down St. Philip, we have several alleyways. We have several little new developments. It's just, if you take that house and move it, you are going to remove, you are going to destroy any opportunity that we have to rebuild what we once had. You are going to remove a symbol that everybody pays attention to. It's a block off of King Street. Everybody knows that house. Whenever we would walk to somebody's house, all we had to do was show them the picture on the petition, and immediately we had their attention. This is you move that house to a block on a street like St. Philip between other homes, you're going to destroy its character. You're going to destroy its status. It is extremely important to our community and to the city of Charleston to maintain what we have and to keep it as unique and to keep it as authentic as possible. You are going to destroy that if that house gets moved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sid. Further members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item? Yes, sir. If you don't mind.
My name is Randall Bursting. I live at 66 Radcliffe Street. We've lived there for 26 years. We moved to Charleston from Chicago because it was a conscious decision without jobs because we love the architecture and the history of the city. When we moved here, that house was a black fraternity with the largest catalpa tree that I've ever seen in the front yard. And over the course of time, it's fallen into disrepair. In 2010, our house needed a new roof. And so we had to put a new roof on an 1852 single house up the street from there. There is currently a chimney on that house that was put on at the turn of the century on the piazza side of the house to service heating systems that there's no record of where they even are in the rooms. But for 26 years, through the old roof, the roof that we put on, and the second roof, there's been plaster problems on the second floor for the entire time until this new roof. Our contractor went to the bar and asked about removing the roof because it's an ugly stucco chimney with a pipe running through the center of it, and was told, oh no, you can't remove that chimney because we can see that from the street when we drive by the house. It's part of the history of that house. So if context and history are important, when I go down Radcliffe Street towards King, I can see 15 Radcliffe when it's there on the road. And to move it out of the way and shove it to the side, I think is ridiculous that a chimney has more rights than what a house has. Now, when I looked at the elevations that were provided by the paperwork, where they want to move the house is currently going to put the dormer and the window side facing into the back of Warren Place, which is a pretty banal brick building on Warren. And so, for some reason, they seem to think that's a better location for the house. In a city where single houses are dark because we're all crowded in between each other, the house currently has nothing but light around it. And what I really don't understand is why, when they send out paperwork that shows all the improvements that could be done, it could be done exactly where that house is located. It doesn't have to be moved between a 4-story brick building and another house, so it turns into every other single house that doesn't get a lot of light. And if Mr. Brownlee feels like he has been shafted on his deal, that house he bought for $500,000 has been on Zillow for over $1 million since August. I don't know that it ever actually hit the public market to be able to be sold. But the neighborhood is currently seeing houses that sell anywhere from about $975,000 up to about $2.1 million, and the median price point for everything seems to be $1,495,000. And so I don't get where all of a sudden he thinks that moving this house is going to increase its property value when it does get a renovation, but it also sacrifices pretty much all of its natural light in that new location. So I'm sorry I didn't prepare anything written, and I'm a little ambling, but I think context is important. I think its history is important, and I think the neighborhood is important. And I don't see why moving that house is going to increase livability for any of those aspects. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment on this agenda? Sir.
Hello, I'm David Skinner. I live at 18 Radcliffe, which is county corner from this house. I'd like to thank the BAR board for giving us the opportunity to present and talk to you about this historic house. And I don't have to really tell you the story, but it is a historic African American house that was built by the Reverend Henry W. Bennett, who was a great leader in the Charleston area, the African Methodist Episcopal churches, the AME, also at the Mother Emanuel Church, which is of great historical importance, I think, for the fabric of African American history in our community. He was also born during the Civil War, which just is a history point. I think Joe and Frank Frank Brumley should just preserve the house for the Reverend Bennett to show Charleston's great African American history before it's too late and moved, erased, and forgotten. And to give an example of what I'm expressing about this being moved and erased and forgotten, there on the corner of, it's not really the corner, but on Queen Street and almost the corner of King, you have the first African American in the U.S. to sit as a justice of the state Supreme Court, the Jonathan Jefferson Wright office. Now sits a terrible parking garage on top of where that house used to be. I think it would be great if kids and students could go and visit historic Black properties, buildings that were built by historic Blacks, and at their original locations, and put up markers and dedicate monuments to this instead of erasing it. We've lost a lot of African American history in Charleston to developers and whatever else. It seems that we really care more about the houses below Broad than what's up that part of the area. Excuse me for a second. And I just think this sets a bad precedent for Charleston history in general and African American history if we allow this, because what's going to stop the next, for whatever reason, they want to move it from this happening again. And I'd also like to say that, Joe, yesterday afternoon we left on a bad note, and I hope you told me that you don't want to make, that I don't want to make you my enemy. I hope you're not my enemy, and I hope Frank is. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment on this agenda?
My name is Marcia Salisbury, and I live at 98 Radcliffe Street. I've been there for 30 years, and I've enjoyed 15 Radcliffe Street. The house for much of that time has really been lovely. And so I disagree that people really want to live. The current yellow color of it, it's just what remains of what had been a very pretty house with stained glass windows. And I don't think they had trouble ever keeping it occupied until it was allowed to go into disrepair. And I really don't think they had trouble keeping it occupied now. And on the note about its heritage, you know, I wonder if maybe Brumley, Mr. Schmidt, gives some thought. You know, the Charleston African American Museum is opening in Virginia. And, you know, we're just catching up in this town and really trying to do things differently than we've done in the past about ignoring history and not really honoring the history of African Americans. The opening museum is a national achievement, really, and it's good for Charleston. It shows that Charleston, it took a long time to get here, but we're a little different. And, you know, adding this house, making it just for them, maybe adding a flood to that area, adding houses and other structures might be a wonderful thing. It might really show something, particularly that area of town, because it was Little Jerusalem, and it was African American, and that's the way Charleston's always been, that dichotomy of, you know, people being, you know, one side here, one side there, but very close. And it doesn't, I think that would just show just a lot of growth and hope and showing our movement as a people. So I just would ask to give it thought and not move the house, keep it where it is, honor that history, and help Charleston move with the museum and other things we're working on.
Thank you, Ms. Salisbury. Further public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Sylvia St. Peter, and I live at 56 Warren Street. I lived there for approximately 5 years, and I've enjoyed really getting to know my neighbors and the neighborhood of Redcliffe Borough during that time. One thing that has really impressed upon me is how seriously our neighborhood takes stewardship of historic Charleston. So in discussing this house and the proposed project, we've really conceptualized all angles of what would preserve the house and preserve the history that lies there in the best ways possible. And so I would ask the BAR to have that same thoughtful consideration as to what precedent moving this house would lead to, and what other alternatives might be possible. I'd also mention that our neighborhood has a track record with the developer who intends to move the house, and the stewardship of those residences has been below the expectations set out for our neighborhood and what we were led to believe this home might be of similar disrepair in those times. And into consideration, we would appreciate that same level of thoughtfulness.
Thank you. Further public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, city staff comments and recommendations.
All right, I'm going to start with some staff notes. I want to make one correction. The preservation plan was not prepared by the BAR staff. And then I want to give some context to the review tonight. This project was deferred at the August 10th, 2022 BARL meeting for additional study and creation of a preservation and feasibility plan for moving the structure. The applicant has returned with those materials. Second, the project was reviewed at BARL because if relocated, the assemblage of parcels would likely lend itself to a larger structure, which would be reviewed at BARL. In this way, the same board which reviews the proposed relocation understands the evolution of the property and how the past might influence any future development. I'd also like to address the reference to ordinance section 54-233, which was noted by the first member of the public. This, I'm just going to read it to you and give you a little background on that. What this says is that it does break the boards up by 10,000 square feet, less or more, and then at the end it does say demolition applications shall be assigned to either the BARS or BARL as determined by staff. We treat this, relocations are tricky, we've talked about that, and they're unusual and they're unique because we don't see a lot of them, but we treat them as a demolition because it elevates, we get more public notice, we get these out in the paper, we have on-site meeting, and so by treating it in the category of demolition, it gets more oversight, and so that's why we handle it very sensitively. Did I have any? I don't think I had any more things I wanted to address. Okay, so we'll move into staff comments. Go to the next one. All right, number one. The lot on which the structure sits is 30 by 54 feet, primarily the footprint of the structure, making the current condition less viable. Number two, while the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties does not recommend relocation of historic structures because this can destroy the historic relationship that existed with the landscape, the existing context of surface parking lot up to the property lines on three sides is a considerable alteration from the original context. The proposed relocation will provide the structure a residential building context like it once had, and it will provide context to the two houses on St. Philip Street. Three, regarding the condition of the structure, the preservation plan indicates relocation to be a viable option and outlines recommendations for its preservation. Four, relocation would maintain appropriate orientation for the front and rear porch. Additionally, the structure would be placed on a foundation of the same height as existing. Five, relocation may offer a quicker opportunity for repairs and restoration to the structure. Six, while it is concerned that once relocated, one might imagine that the residents always existed in this new location, staff finds that the benefits of doing so at this time outweigh this potential negative. Relocations of houses have occurred in downtown. Number seven, Ordinance Section 54-350 states, this section is called Relocation and Moving of Structures. This section states that no structure may be relocated unless the BAR finds that the structure as relocated will be in general harmony with the prevailing character of the neighborhoods to which it is being located in terms of height, mass, volume, scale, and the location of the structure on the lot. The proposed location for the house allows it to be placed amongst structures of similar height, scale, and mass. 8. While historic, the 1928 rear addition is not in a stable condition and is in a state of disrepair. It appears to have been altered a couple of times, and its removal allows a general cleanup of this elevation, which may not be visible. 9. The recommendations of the preservation plan shall be followed in detail with material repair and replacement. Any field discoveries that increase the scope shall be discussed and reviewed by BAR. And then finally, our recommendation is final approval for relocation with board and staff comments.
Thank you, Ms. Parrish. The applicant now has the opportunity to designate someone on his behalf to respond to public comment or city staff comments or recommendations if it is so inclined. It does not have to use this time.
I'd like to clarify a couple of points. Past 40 years, I've been in the business of preserving Charleston, not manipulating Charleston. We don't move houses ourselves. We don't have, but my policy is always for saving buildings, as we stated in the past. Besides having Kim Lavin do her report, we had a request from a professor at the College of Charleston, Kim Everly, who wanted to take his class through here and do a project, and they also generated a report. And the conclusion of his report was this house was better moved, put back into a community context house in the neighborhood, not leaving the neighborhood, but back in a residential context. History is a funny thing. As part of the report, there's been a lot of talk about the Reverend Bennett, and I don't want to disparage the Reverend Bennett, but the reality of the conclusion of the report was that Reverend Bennett actually demolished a freedman's house to build this house. He did not move into it. He didn't intend to move into it. He never lived in it, and he never died in it.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that report part of what's been submitted here? The College of Charleston report?
No.
Okay. Then if it hasn't been reviewed by the board, if we could.
This information is in Kim.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
So it is. I don't want. So that the house has a new notoriety of African American heritage, which is fine, but we need to make sure we have that history documented. Right. He did not raise his family in his house. He did not build it to raise his family's house. He did not live in it. That's minor, but it's just sort of, it's a tragedy that this house is standing alone. Its notoriety is the fact that it's a abandoned house. Its reputation is that it's a bad example of Charleston for demolition by neglect. Frank Rumley was not the person demolition by neglect. In fact, it was the family itself who couldn't seem to pull it all together. We have an opportunity to put it back in a context that's appropriate in a neighborhood that's appropriate. We have a letter from the family encouraging the house to be moved, excited about wanting to come see the house being moved. She has submitted a letter to the board, which you should have, was addressed to you back in September after the meeting when you requested proof that the family indeed did that, and she sent a letter on September 14 to you specifically stating, and I don't want to quote, but that we're looking forward to this happening. I don't believe in leaving things behind as an example of bad architecture. A perfect example is our building that I own on Main Street, Life of Georgia. A 3-story building was torn down, put a single-story Life of Georgia office building on that site. And it came to conversation that maybe we should leave examples of bad urban planning to sort of show the entire story of the history of Charleston. That's absurd. I'm sorry. That would be, that just, it wasn't, it was set aside, but the concept is there, and that's almost what I'm hearing today. When we met on the site yesterday, and I've been there a few days before that, since that time, another window's been broken out of this house, and there were shakes on the street. This window wasn't broken 2 days before that. We don't want to leave examples of demolition by neglect. Frank doesn't want to be part of demolition by neglect. The intent was to move it, to give it a new home. Houses are like, especially in cities, are like people. No person can live alone. They need community. Houses need people in them to create that community. And that's...
I'm sorry, well, the speaker has the floor.
That's my passion, reason for being involved in this objective of seeing a house that we had an opportunity to save and put back in the historic context.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
Can I say one thing to what he said? I know that's out of turn, but can I just say one thing?
Sure.
The Reverend Bennett's wife, after he passed away, lived in that house. There's advertisements in papers where she rented rooms to other blacks to support her family. There is a historic context of the Bennetts being in that house. If I'd have known, I would have brought a copy. There's a report that was done by the Historical Society or the Preservation Society that states this, that Mrs. Bennett raised her kids in that house and rented out rooms to support them. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. All right, we'll now move to board discussion and a vote on the potential relocation of this house. What do my fellow board members have to say about it?
I don't know why y'all look at me. I just showed up today.
Well, you always have such thoughtful comments.
I'll start. Well, and I'm not trying to make loud, but first of all, I really appreciate the neighborhood concerns and the passion. I can hear the passion of your concern about the house, and I know the house pretty well. My office, I grew up here, and I've walked by it 1,000 times. Couple of things, though. I can't help. I looked at the agenda obviously before being summoned here today, and at first glance, I can't see why we wouldn't relocate it. It's surprising if you studied our city, how many houses have been relocated. It's amazing. You'd be really surprised. I'm not saying it happens all the time. The DAR is always for it, but generally speaking, it's not as uncommon as you would think. So I want to throw that out there. And at first glance, I heard, and I think this is part of the passion of what people are saying, but the house is not going to be shoved to the side, hidden, or erased and forgotten. It's basically going to be put into, but it's going to be put into a context that's more appropriate for that house. And I think forgetting the fact that it is losing its historic original location, it would not be out of character for it to be where they're proposing as a preservationist or architect. So what I and this might not be true, but I think what I'm hearing is a lot of concern for what comes next. Everyone's saying, well, let's just build more houses next to it. Well, moving houses doesn't prevent building houses there. So that's really not the issue. I think it's just creating a large footprint. Everyone doesn't want a large footprint, a large building there. That's kind of what the issue was. That's not our charge, though. And I understand those concerns, but our charge is it appropriate to move this house from point A to point B? And I think it is. I know you don't like to hear that, but as a preservationist, you know, it is not out of character to pick that house up. There's sometimes it is out of character, and there's also some houses that are very unique to their site or historic structures that are very unique and specific to their site, and to move them will completely change or affect their historic character. I don't think this is one of those. Unfortunately, it's surrounded by parking. It's just an awful location. I think no one disagree. We don't want to see a house surrounded by parking. But I support it from an architectural and a historic preservation mindset. I'm putting it relocated. So I would be in favor of this application.
Thank you, Mr. Bello. And for those who haven't had the benefit of being here before, may not know Mr. Bello, in addition to being a practicing architect here in town, he's the former city architect. So we always appreciate his ability to sit in, and he shares perspectives.
I've forgotten
A number of perspectives. No, you're well informed. Further board commentary on this agenda item.
There's a lot of preservation people here today. And it's great because we can debate, and I would debate with Eddie about this being a unique structure to its site. Of course, it's a unique structure to its site because it was the house that was built on that site. And so it is unique to that site. But I think it's important just to use knowledge. And so if we go to the roots of this, I asked Joe to please put together a plan, get somebody to look at the structure and stuff, and you did, and I read it. And Kim did a fine job putting it together. I did some research with National Park Service because it's troubling for me, because I certainly understand the plan and how it would work and improve yards and off-street parking for that. I mean, I get it, right? But Department of Interior, this is taken from moving hidden bit. It starts with, according to the Department of Interior and the National Park Service, the relocation of historic buildings is not a viable preservation practice for historic properties. And that's the starting sentence, right? Now it goes on for there with exceptions, and I'm not going to talk about the exceptions that are about significant historic structures, because this is not one. I do not believe this should be, or it should be considered as a significant historic structure. But it does have a section which talks about proposals for moving historic structures will consider the effects of movement on structures, their present environments, their proposed environments, the archaeological research value of the structures, and their sites. And then I focused on a historic structure of less than national significance. And then it specifically says, may be moved if it cannot practically be preserved on its present site. And it stops there. And so I read Kim's report, and you know, I asked Kim, can this structure be practically preserved on its current site?
In terms of ethical historic preservation practices, I would say no. Giving room for its use as a residence.
It's not about the use. It's about, can it be practically preserved? So I don't think it is. After reading your report, I think it can be. And you noted the deficiencies, which are consistent with what I would think would be there. You noted the strengths. You know, the roof, the windows could be preserved, which I agree with also. So when we're just looking at facts, right, and the expert goes and does the report, and the report comes back, and everybody can have a different interpretation of it. I get that, right? But my interpretation of your report is that it can be practically preserved. Do I understand the plan for relocating it and how that would make it more functional in some ways? You bet. I understand that also. This is a real struggle, and what it boils down to me, what it boils down to for me is what, Mr. Chairman, you tell us we can't talk about, right?
And we're not.
And we're not going to, which means that we have to evaluate that structure as if somebody just came in out of the blue and said, I just want to move the structure. That's it, I want to move the structure. Not for any reason, I just want to move this structure. And I don't understand that. Well, I mean, since we can't talk about it, we can't talk about it. But I don't understand how we could even consider or support just a random request to move a structure. And I don't. And again, there are other factors we can't consider, and I understand that. But if we can't consider them, we can't consider them.
Thank you.
So I also want to say that the whole time that Joe was giving his presentation, or y'all were giving your presentation, neither Joe nor Mr. Brumley nor anybody else made any comments about anything. So I hope that this can be a really respectful group and let people talk and be free to talk without interruption.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the applicant has done everything that we've asked them to do. We deferred it the first time so that they could go back to the well and do exactly what we told them to do with the preservation plan. My understanding was that the reason for requesting the preservation plan was to understand or have some kind of guarantee on what the owner was going to do to maintain this property going forward at its relocated place, make sure that the context was correct and that the architectural elements were preserved in situ as best possible. And so I don't think it is fair for this board to have an applicant do a deferral with what I thought was the presumption that we're going to, we need more context, we need more information, we need to understand your preservation plan, to understand what we're going to protect this house. But that ultimately, as Mr. Bello has said, they've met the criteria to move the house. And we have a standard or an exception in the standard from the National Trust that tells us that when we have a house that's isolated like this, one of the things that is appropriate to do is to move it into an area where it is within context, which in this case would be a series of single houses or at least houses that are of similar dimensions.
So, Mr. Chairman, just because you thought about it a lot and I thought about it a lot, I'm not sure where that is in the National Trust Standards, where it says you can do that or should do that. And because of my just basic experience with structures, there's two reasons for a preservation plan. One is to determine, does it need to be moved? Meaning, sometimes there's so much deterioration that you do one thing or the other. And in this case,
we had that issue in slightly different context, but at 609, 613 King Street, where we initially confronted with demolition, and then that turned into a relocation. Also, interestingly, right, I think around the corner from where the sign is for the new Jerusalem district, and we preserved that building. But we relocated at the same time. So, further commentary from the board.
I think the chairman will get to in just a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. The applicant is allowed to be acknowledged by the chair, but if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and go, if that's all right.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Smith.
One thing that is in the report and certainly came to my mind as comfort for what we're trying to do, and I'm not trying to do things that I think are inappropriate. In the report or in the Department of Interior, they specifically address and it's lost its context. And that is that is everybody's understanding of the right concern. So
on page 21 of the preservation plan, the National Park Service doesn't recommend removing or relocating buildings or landscape features, thereby destroying the historic relationship between buildings and landscapes. And that's the only mention of opposition to relocation. Mr. Menderson. Can you share with me what you were reading?
5.3.5.4.5. Movement of historic structures, NPS park policy.
But that's the National Park Service.
Yes.
At the risk of perhaps regretting this, ma'am, I'm going to let you say what you would like.
I'll give you an example of my own home. Show all the different street views. You'll see my house in one. My house is in a very similar situation that 15 Radcliffe sits in. I'm on the corner. I have a church on one side. I have the church auxiliary building directly across the street from me. And the other side, to my right side of Radcliffe Street, is the Jesus Saves Church. I live between two churches, so to Mr. Schmidt's point about, not having community and being sort of isolated, I've lived in an isolated house for 20 years, and I have no problem with it. So I'm speaking out of 20 years of living sort of isolated. I have one house behind me that is, I never see. It's on St. Philip Street side. So I'm in a very similar situation to the way King Radcliffe Street is currently situated. And once again, Mr. Brown was willing to extend his own property lines. He owns all of that property. He could extend those property lines around 15 Radcliffe Street. It would make it much more charming and appealing.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, I will ask this because the young lady is waiting patiently. Do you have any idea how long it would take to move the house moving timeline? Maybe an average or the longest possible interval?
Timeline to move a house is very quick. Time after that would just be the restoration, and we all know that could take anywhere from 6 months to a year, depending on how much work is to be done on the house. Your question, I don't know how to address your question about the fence, or there's some misunderstanding of what you heard. What we're proposing to do is actually add more dog yard, if you will, more driveway to that property by pushing this house further away. That's the property line we're talking about moving. So where the fence was, that line would be moved several feet further, and you can actually use the driveway. And of course, that's obviously.
Just a quick question. I'm assuming you are students at College of Charleston, and this is your second year living there.
It's my second year. She's signing.
So probably juniors. You're going to be out by the time you'll have graduated by the time this is completed, if it's approved. If you want to.
Further board comments?
I'll share. I'm reminded of the Latin phrase, "Vox populi, vox Dei," voice of the people is the voice of God. There's been a lot of public comment tonight. There's been a lot of public comment submitted to us, both in this presentation and the previous one. I think it's very evident that the community at large and the ones that are most deeply impacted by this would prefer the building, the structure not to move. What I find most interesting is that in the public comments submitted to us, is that there are residents and neighbors who are willing to see the building moved if it is preserved. And they don't want to see it moved, but they're willing to if it's preserved. I can only feel like we're on this King Solomon here. You know, you're looking at two people who are claiming to be owners or mothers, and one's willing to butcher the baby and the other one isn't. I'm not claiming that we are as wise as King Solomon, but just thought it was an interesting anecdote. What I agree with most, I agree with many of the things that the public comment has entered into the record. What is in our purview, I can agree with, and what is not, I have no comment. But most importantly is the context. And I think, and I don't know what the other properties were surrounding this property or how they were demolished or moved or whatever. But if it is in the purview of the Board of Architectural Review to see those buildings demolished, then we might have created our own issue here. That we have created the context of which the applicant is now trying to say exists or doesn't exist. There have been some good points of, there's an opportunity for a developer to come in and create the context based on that whole, rather than it being moved to create context elsewhere or to complement two other buildings in a larger multi-use building next to it. At our last meeting, and based on what Mr. Meadows has shared, and looking at past comments, the merit of just moving the house to move the house, I can't square. And I think it most appropriate for a board like ours to try and maintain or renew the context that was, rather than build something new.
I'd have to go back and look, but I think it's a good observation. But if the demolition was in 1960, maybe the condos, all things up. I don't know that the VAR would have had the purview for demolition at that time, but it's still
Yeah,
very common.
but the city, somebody had to approve that those buildings be demolished. So we are now, we are the beneficiaries of those decisions that were made previously.
I'm pretty confident the VAR did not. One thing that you were wondering about, if you look at the Sanborns there, to the west, there were two single houses next to it, not that different from what they're proposing now to move it next.
And I say, let's bring those two single houses back next to it.
Well, that's not what we're supposed to do.
You're exactly right.
But I would, and I'm not gonna change your mind, but, and again, I appreciate, I don't want to walk out and everybody's throwing things at me, but I appreciate where you're going, but it's not moving it just to move it. I would argue, take everything out of this. I would argue picking it up and putting it in this location is much better contextually for the house. It fits in the streetscape. All the other things that we look for sometimes when you relocate a house, it's tricky. It's the house. There's other buildings that are moved. You've got piazza on the wrong side. You've got, one's 4 stories and everything else is 2, whatever. This is on the same block. So and I get what you guys are saying. I agree with some of it, but it really, it seems appropriate to move it within what is a very appropriate character. It's in the same historic setting, it's the same block. So I'm in support of the
Further public comment.
I know she's the same. It's not like this structure will be moved out of town in a different location, but it's within the same block, sisters, perpendicular streets. It's enhancing the context of St. Hills with moving this house and specifically preserving. And that's what we're talking about. And we're not talking about the next step on this, but I think all the majority opposition is coming from the fact what is going to be next, and not necessarily about this house being preserved, moved, and used, and given the life to it.
Merits, that's true.
Yeah. And that is not the case for me. Okay, fair enough.
I know, I'm not arguing.
No, again, peace.
This board in particular is famous for disagreeing vehemently. I know we know that among each other. Sure, Mr. Brown.
Very much. I've reached out to the Bennett family in detail. I'm the only person in the room that has established a relationship with Mary Bennett. She is the granddaughter of the owner of the house. I reached out to her in Washington, met her through when we purchased the house 2 years ago. She was the executive administrator of the estate. She was responsible for it. She chatted with her family about it, her brothers, sisters, and cousins. They made the decision to sell the house because they were not in a position to maintain it. We bought the property 2 years ago and we saved it. We didn't do that. I bought the Warren Place property 25 years ago, and the Warren Place itself, not this property. We played no role in the demolition of my new life, this house, or any other house. The idea of why it was to move it and save it. And that's what we've done. So I've established a relationship with Ms. Bennett, and I quote you from the letter that's been supplied to the VAR and members of the VAR. She says in 2 of the paragraphs, I'm writing this form on this plan to move the house and restore it. She closes with, I am thrilled and delighted Ms. Brumman is working to preserve a house owned by a white family who was active in life. So we have established that, we can talk to her. She is the representative of the family. They're interested in seeing the house moved and preserved. I can tell you, I didn't buy it to throw the house away. We're going to move it, do a beautiful job of restoration of it. I'm willing to post a bond. That's what we're going to do. If anybody has a concern or reservation about that, it's an investment. We're going to move it to save the house. The family is very much. Thank you very much.
To be clear to my fellow staff members and to my fellow board members, because of the nature of this application, its contentiousness, and to make sure that the public feels that they've had a full and fair opportunity to be heard, I'm going to allow these comments, but I would ask them to be addressed to things that either the board has raised or that the applicant just raised, if you don't mind. And so starting with you, Ms. Sitton. Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to say that, it's wonderful that that the family of this home of the Reverend Bennett is involved. However, it is a great deal more important to me that the historic the whole idea of the history of it is the fact that it was built by an African American in a neighborhood that was a family neighborhood. And these people, whether they lived in that house or not, they no longer have a vested interest in Charleston. We do. And we would like to preserve what they left behind. They obviously had other things that they were interested in and didn't feel that their place was in Charleston. They no longer have a vested interest in the history of Charleston. We do. And I think that is extremely important. I think it's also extremely important that we maintain the house where it is so that we have an opportunity to preserve what we once had, or to go back, to rebuild.
Ms. Skinner, can I see your hand raised?
Yes, I'd like to read from documents, Ms. Kim, and I don't recall her last name, presented in the preservation plan. In 2019, a lawsuit was filed between members of the extended Bennett family. So which side of the family did Mr. Brumley receive the letter from? A letter to the side of the family that wanted to keep the house?
The builder of the house.
Okay, but this was a lawsuit filed.
Harvard very hard.
It's a lawsuit.
I was going to say, let's stop at the back and forth. Ms. Skinner, if you could finish your remarks briefly, but no more questions, Ms. Brumman.
One paragraph that's in your paperwork. And the house was sold by court order to 15 Radcliffe Street LLC for $500,000. August 10, 2022, the new owner sought city permission from Board of Architectural Review Large to relocate the house to 120 St. Philip Street to prevent the construction of a large parking garage on the surface lot. The DAR expressed some support for moving the house, but also had concerns about how the matter was handled procedurally. For example, the future house after relocation and submission of the request to BAR large instead of BAR small. In the end, the BAR voted to defer the application until more information.
Thank you. Ms. Skinner? Yes, sir?
My name is Raymond Mueller, with 69, I didn't get to introduce myself, it's 69 Morris. And I think it all comes down to this, and I'm listening very carefully to the way things have been phrased, and by various individuals. And I keep hearing that the house would move the house to preserve it. And I think we've heard that it can be preserved, as Mr. Betters indicated, and has been validated. But the ordinance, does it have to be moved to be preserved? Or can it, is the object to move it or to preserve it? So I think it could be, my opinion, not an architect. I think the issue is, should it be preserved? Not, do you have to move it to preserve it, or can it be preserved in situ?
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Further board comment?
I'm going to make a motion, and I appreciate that. And just to clarify, I have no doubt it could be preserved in place. That was not my reason for support in relocation. My reason for support is that it is currently completely out of, in that context, it's out of character. That's that. I'm getting ready to, but I want to finish my spiel. They got to talk way more than they're supposed to. So I just want to clarify that's not my reason. I am in support of this because I think it is an appropriate and a better contextual location. Move it from the location it is now, to the place that they are proposing. And I respect both of your comments. But I just see that differently. So,
and before you motion too, I just want to say thank you to everyone who showed up tonight. It really means a lot to us and can certainly always influence how we move on a decision. It's important, so thank you.
Yes, second that.
Thank you for coming and being heard.
All right, so I'm going to make the motion
as a final approval for the relocation
with staff comments.
With staff comments.
If there are any board comments in there, but
final approval for relocation incorporating staff comments. Is there a second? There's a second from Ms. Sobchuk, so the motion's in order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
No, not in favor.
Mr. Metters? Ms. Sobchuk? Mr. Bella? And myself, yea in favor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask for a 5-minute recess.
Certainly, we will be at ease. For 5 minutes.
They're on his side.
Is she calling me? Thank you. Sure. I can explain that again if I need to.
Sure. Thank you for being here.
My explanation was that we treated it as a demolition, and that's
not a
why
demolition.
we treat it as a demolition so that it gets more public notice. It gets more sensitivities. There's always the option to appeal the decision.
The law and the code allows for us to review it. And we actually give it a heightened review for removal. That's what we're saying. We're not treating it as a demolition. We have the option to do it. Mr. Dolly did a good job on your presentation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. You always have a difference. Thank you.
And I think, I guess if we weigh the context of what I was thinking, we've been here so long, people don't want to hear the lawyer blow it, but weighing the context is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Sure.
It just, you can see how compatible it is with one of these right beside it. There'll be much better there.
So it really is.
It's in my mind, it's a weighing between contexts. And that's not gonna change. It's not gonna, even though we can't talk about it, it's not gonna change the next iteration, whatever happens.
That word content, just so it would be in a better setting, because I acknowledge it's a better setting. But that's, yeah, that's partially.
Well, but we've got the National Trust Standards, which is in our notebook, in which we incorporated as part of the municipal. Sure, no, I know you know what you're talking about.
It's like, there's from restoration renovations, which is covered under policy, and there's actually a relocation. Wow. Yeah, so much.
You already got it. You got it.
That's what
Well, to be clear, there's no question that one can restore. So you have to exactly.
That's the standard that she was coming back.
Which I,
Right. Well, but I think it goes to the broader, whatever I was concerned, what I've said for years about the interface between water and planning, really, and VAR. The problem we're confronted with here is we have a single limiter zone, mile share zone, and we're not allowed to take into consideration. You know, I probably let people get too far away from the shore, but I don't.
I was kind of trying.
Sure.
Please, no, yeah, of course, but no, I'm with you completely. Thank you.
Always appreciate it. How's your knee doing?
It's better. So
Okay, headed the right way after that.
Right way.
I had 5.4.5.3.5. The National Park Service. It's just the document. It's just the I was going to
It's always interesting that one of the controversial parts clears through. I think people might want to see, based on what happened tonight, just they were concerned about how businesses are taken.
This is what makes showed the process. That to me,
My thing with these people, I understand they're. Yeah, that's right.
Hey, I enjoy
I completely understand these people.
I just share
But I do have to think.
All right, hey, I tell the story. Look, I tell the story all the time when you stop at my house and you go.
And it's very hard for people to wall that off, even when I tell them 5 times.
You're in the roofing
Construction and
business?
roofing, but you do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Deal with the roof. That was so hilarious.
Is it still like?
It's not, it's just like a scratch brick. That's what it is, right? I mean, already do my chimney. So, but giving, as soon as I get there, it's this. People need to be here. So that's so much. They go back to the cut structure. And then you can do it, you'd be more prone to it. Maybe I should. Maybe I should. Later.
Justin, happy New Year. Good.
So Kim was just telling me, she said, I found that 5.3. Completely. So it was just fun. As soon as I said it, I hope it's true.
Well, that's what I was pointing out. That's why I asked you this. Did you get it for the park service?
Yeah,
For sure.
That's fine.
Ideally, but I can hustle out if it's a little bit late.
And it's also tip off of COC, UNCW tonight, 7 o'clock. I was going to.
We talking about pushing off the agenda?
I'd be happy to defer it all next week or 2 weeks.
Well, I think that we have several, and it's always gets wrong, but I would assume the next few meetings.
I think so.
I need to leave a little bit on the last one. So it's not.
It's as Tori was walking us through it, it's technically an appeal. You might as well hear it as an issue of first impression. I'm fine with that. And I'm going to recuse on the next agenda.
Okay.
And I'm gonna pass the chair to, Mr. Bella.
Really?
You're gonna be the chair for agenda item number 5. And I'll sign for, just so you know on the record, I'm recusing myself to avoid the next Friday, but not.
You
because
remember.
I'm invested in it.
We'll get you a recusal slip.
Sit down here and John.
I will.
Good one. All right. I have never done this since CMC. Okay, can we go?
I'm ready. Okay.
Just use your head.
I had a gavel when I served this chair.
Did you?
And I used it. Just to close the meeting. All right, we're moving on to agenda item number 5. And this one is 50 East Bay Street, the Carolina Yacht Club. This is the boathouse. This structure is not rated. It's in the Charleston neighborhood, High District 3. It was constructed in 1992 and it's in the Old and Historic District. The request is for alterations and an addition to this the two-story boathouse, a waterside outbuilding at the Carolina Yacht Club. All right, the red box here showing you where the structure is, and what you really want to pay close attention to here is the visibility from East Bay. And I mean, this is the public right away that we'll be talking about is East Bay. So what sort of visibility lines that you can pick up on there? This image is taken from East Bay. And this is an image of the boathouse. All right, Mr. Jeff Johnston.
Great, thank you. Thanks to your board and staff. Appreciate your service to the city and to the design team. We always appreciate it. Got the team introductions. My name is Jeff Johnston. I'm architect with SMHA. With me tonight is Zach Kalish. He's the general manager of the Carolina Yacht Club, and Brooke Linus, who's an architect with Arco and SMHA. And we're proud and honored to present the boathouse renovations to you tonight. I'm going to use my slideshow here. Just to talk about the way that the club orients themselves to the building, I just want to talk about how we internalize the building, just to familiarize yourself with the site, ourselves with the site. We call this building the South Building, and you all might know that as the Marsh Building. Call this the North Property, which is the projected bays, the repeating bays, the brick bays at the tower. That's what people think of. I think when I think of Yacht Club, it's this building. But as Tori pointed out, we're talking about this boathouse building. As a part of the design process, just wanted to state that we did meet with the neighborhood association, and we had a meeting with adjacent neighbors. We've met with the Preservation Society, and we met with the directly adjacent neighbor at 2 Concord with the Navy degassing stations. We've had a lot of conversations and several conversations internal to the club. As you might know, the club has many members, and everything so far has received in positive light. Share that. The history of the site is pretty interesting, and it informed a little bit of the design, as we'll talk through the design later. A couple things that stood out to me was that the boathouse was on kind of the commercial wharf zone, which the landscape of the water side there has changed dramatically over the last 100 years, or maybe 200 years. But one picture that I thought was of note was of the wharf building here on the top left. And a few things that struck me about that was the gable form, the broad overhang, the shallow slope, and the bracketed columns. I thought all those things were interesting and worthy of holding on to. On the next slide, more history. This is another view of the yacht club from Prop Point. You can see the historic Charleston Mystery House on the left there. Moving on to the next slide, please. Internal to the site, the project's immediate context, as Corey pointed out, a lot of this building, most you can't see this building from the public right away. So the immediate context is really inside the property. The top left building is the north property. Also the south property here, or south building, that's the old Omar Shrine. This is the Navy degassing station, which is right next door, or now it's residence. And this is on the dock looking across the current boathouse to both the north and south properties. This is the boathouse itself. This was built in 1991, 1992, somewhere in that range. It was originally built as an elevated structure, open on the ground floor with some systems and utilities down there. The property now sits in a V zone, and that's going to come into play with some of the design. But the building was originally built to be a sailing center, so we had one big open space where they could fold sails, and then had some restrooms that served the sailing folding area and the marina to the docks. What we're intending on doing, this slide shows a little bit of the demolition scope that we'll get into further slides. Next one, please. This is the original program. The original floor plan was open down on the ground level, except for that yellow box. The yellow box contained water heaters and electrical panels and coolers and things that can't exist in the V zone. So the demolition plan is the lower plan. We're intending on taking those things away and putting them on the second floor. Next slide, please. Second floor talks about the original program again. It was in the mid-90s. It was converted to a restaurant and then some bathrooms and wraparound porch. Next slide, please. This is the immediate context on East Bay. This is looking towards the east. Next slide, please. And then that's the immediate context on East Bay looking west. And then in both of those, you can see the outline of the boathouse written in an abstract way. To understand the scale of this versus the existing context. Next slide, please. Awesome. Now this is a representation of the demolition for the existing boathouse, and it's a little abstract as well because this building is going to be expanded on 4 sides. So a lot of the building is going to be enveloped by the new addition. So the goals of the addition is to reorient the dining area to, again, the V zone compliance, trying to put all the stuff on the V zone back in the second floor. Expand the kitchen. The kitchen is about the size of one of the chairs. We're trying to make that a very large kitchen. Reorient the bar and put the bathrooms in an ADA compliant and also add fire suppression. So again, the addition is going to envelop the existing building. So the existing roof will be demolished, the trusses, the walls, the windows, the railings, the wraparound porch, It's essentially going to be the structure that remains. Next, please. This is a site plan that just demonstrates in a small plan, but it demonstrates that the building is kind of hemmed in. We have a lot of site constraints. If you remember from the aerial image, there's a lot of paving that surrounded this building. And the paving being a yacht club is purposeful. Boat storage, boat landing, boat washing, pedestrian circulation, vehicular circulation. So as a design challenge, Zach tells me that I need to color within the lines, is my term, where we were bounded on the north side by an existing curb, which is this boundary right there. To the west, we have some ADA parking spaces that we did not want to displace. To the south, we had the OCRM critical line. And then to the east, we had this boat ramp and boat wash area that we wanted to respect. And we wanted to respect all of those things. But yet we needed the program to be larger. So we took as much space as we could without affecting any of those things. And that's the presentation or that we'll present tonight. That's the design as we see it. Moving on to the next plan. This is the proposed floor plan, and the orienting device is the lower left is the elevator. The lower program is essentially we've got an enclosed space and an open space, and the porch on the south. We also have some circulation points. We've got the stairs that lead up to the second floor, some ramps that lead to the parking to the first floor. And then on the upper right quadrant, we have some stairs that are egress stairs that primarily be service stairs to serve the restaurant. And that goes from the ground floor to the second floor. Next slide, please. Again, as an orienting device, the elevator is on the lower left. That's an elevator tower. We have a stair at the dining, which is oriented towards the south. The great views of the South Harbor. And then the bar is in the upper right that faces up towards the Ravenel Bridge. The interior dining shown in yellow there is the dining that's oriented towards the south. Bathrooms that serve both the restaurant and the marinas are there on the upper left quadrant. And then in between is the expanded kitchen. It's about 3 times larger than the original kitchen. Staff toilet. Again, all this will have the fire suppression, egress, and the more expected amenities with the restaurant of today's standard. Next slide, please. This is a neat overlay that just talks about the existing as relative to the new. The aqua box is the current conditioned space, and the purple rectangle shape is the current deck. So you can see here where the new addition, as I said before, envelopes the existing. Next slide, please. And before we get into the elevations, just thinking about what has been driving the design. This is the route plan. And the route plan didn't drive the design, but all these elements together drive the design. The route plan has, again, thinking about the site. It's got a flat roof over the kitchen. That's where all the mechanicals would go. It's the grease exhaust and the HVAC and all that other fun stuff. Screened with a parapet. And then it's got a low hip roof. It matches that same slope that would have the existing boathouse had, but it also matches the slope of the wharf buildings that we saw earlier. And to the south, you see the low slope, lower slope over the dining porch, and then the roof of the elevator tower on the lower left. That elevator tower in all these plans and the design itself is an orienting feature. Next. The elevations, this is one of 3 dining venues at the yacht club, and this one is by far the most casual. And in that, with the casual environment that the members appreciate, also goes with a casual architecture and an interactive architecture and one that's intuitive. And a big piece of that was how did we get to the building? And knowing that this needed to have an elevator that was ADA accessible, we chose to feature that elevator as an icon, something that would orient things. And as I was talking about through the plan, that elevator has become the thing that everything else organizes around. So with that elevator, looking at the this might be a little bit of a stretch, but looking at the original yacht club building, got a great interior elliptical stairs, and then there's a circular stair. And at the top of that is a tower. There's a cupola. And thinking that 200 years later, we have different circulation needs and kind of copying or mirroring or borrowing the architecture of that and applying it to this elevator tower. So there's a little bit of continuity between the old and the new, and then using it as an orienting device for those who are familiar with property and those who are not. The lower levels going to have a lot of events where people are not a lot, but they will have events where people need some orienting device. So the elevator helps to do that. We'll look at that in some renderings. That top elevation shows just that tower with the stairs going up, and that's the broad side of the building that overlooks the dining. The middle left elevation is the bar that faces the Ravenel Bridge. The east, the elevation in the middle right is the parking lot side. We've got to honor or respect the handicap parking spaces. We are actually cantilevering out the bathroom, so that's that portion that's cantilevered. We'll look at that some renderings of the view. And then the bottom elevation, which is the north view, is the one that's not captured in the 3D perspective, so just spend a little bit more time there. This is the bar that goes up towards the Ravenel or the harbor. We've got a little zone here that's a service zone, and the bar, back bar. So here's the restrooms, if you remember. This middle portion is the kitchen, and the kitchen is going to project out, and that's where the mechanicals will be on top of that roof. And then that projection has broken up the rhythm of the long siding here, so that helps that long run of siding and keeps the whole building in scale. So, next, please.
So,
this is the building section. We can talk about it.
Mr. Johnson, Jeff, I think we're getting close to exceeding our time limit if we haven't already.
Sure.
Given the limited visibility of this, if you could mostly just focus on the exterior.
Sure.
I appreciate you explaining why we need the elevator and all that, but I think if we could just mostly focus on what you can see.
We'll do that. So let's move on to the next slide. And the next one, maybe 3. Uh-oh.
There was a series of perspectives that I remember seeing on there.
3D.
Did you guys get to look at that?
I looked at them.
I'm not sure.
They're great. They're very helpful.
Yeah.
Sorry we're not seeing them.
I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm not sure.
that's right. That keeps me right.
Would you-
Sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen. I was just trying to get you to those. I want to see those. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, again, the idea there was the stair towers, the orienting device, and the materials we're proposing are wood siding, and top of the roof, exposed timber.
Thank you. I didn't need you to rush that. Since you ran out of drawings, I think you needed to. So thank you very much.
Thank you guys for your time.
Are there any board questions for the applicant? Okay. Are there any public comments about this application? Okay, so staff.
We have one comment,
That's
Eddie.
great.
The existing boathouse consists of a low-sloped roof, deep overhangs, and an uncovered wraparound deck that spans the entire building. These might be considered the most character-defining features of the building, and they convey casual horizontal proportions. Proposed alterations use gridded glazing and transoms, provide unity between the ground and main levels, use one or more tactile screening panels at the first floor, and include a tower element to denote the main entry. Additionally, railing dominates all 4 elevations of the existing building, and the improvements make this much less dominant. Therefore, we are recommending conceptual approval with board and staff comments.
Okay, board comments. Discussion.
Actually,
I'm sorry. Do you have any response to that? Okay.
I actually think the tower could be a little bit taller, and I think that the eave overhang could be reduced just a little. And I think the roof pitch should be more consistent and softer, because there's something about the roof pitch. I'm sorry we don't have that, but I studied it. It's almost got this and then this, and on the tower, right? And when you look at the tower on the main building, it has a more consistent design. There's a line about 18 inches up on it. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe it's an offset, but those are my total comments. I think that's,
I think I appreciate the fact that they reference to the historic structure which was there and trying to bring some elements to complement that power. Also, all that, but other than that, it's I think it's nicely developed addition and enclosure. So I agree with staff recommendation.
And I'll just add, and so Mr. Matters, are you saying only the tower roof is what you'd like to have them look at?
Yep.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? The
Yeah.
tower roof comes down.
It has a break in it.
Yeah, the existing cupola does have that same kind of broken tip.
It does, but it's, you're on the boathouse, at least when I reviewed the plans, it's much more acute. There's much more of this. And on the main roof, you almost can't delineate between the two. It's there because you got a line, and I know that, but I almost couldn't see that it was two different planes. But on the boathouse, it's like this and then like this.
Well, I didn't pick up on that, but I will say, and I'm sorry we're not able to see the 3D images, because I that's a really good comment. I'm sorry I didn't pick it up, but I think the design is very well done, and I, like Luda, I appreciate recalling some of the historic moves that were made. Yeah, and not to lead any motions,
I'll be
but
happy to motion.
I would be okay if a lot of those staff leading the motion.
I'll be happy to. You're recommending a final, or
It's very limited. Again, I'm very biased on these things, but it's very limited view from the public right away, and it's very well done. And other than Mr. Metter's comments, I don't know that I would need to see it again at the board. But I'm only the chair. So.
Well, I think if I had an understanding that you had an understanding of what I'm talking about, I appreciated what we were talking about, then I'd be okay with it.
I understand what you're saying.
Also, so I think it's the pickup on the new tower from the old tower. The only thing that was different was this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think.
So in an optical illusion, it will be even less this in reality. So
Not what I saw. No, I looked at it.
No. What I'm saying is, I support what you're saying.
Okay.
Because in the reality, it will be even less.
Yeah.
Something they like.
No, up to you. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine.
How about motion for preliminary approval with the board and staff comments? Yeah.
Well,
it just kicks a conceptual preliminary final, right?
Yeah. Now, a preliminary would be talking more about materials and any details, which are not provided in this set. So typically we take the route of conceptual, preliminary, final somewhere.
I'm going to go with
But
this.
we have also done conceptual with final details to staff, meaning that staff would pick up all the rest.
That's what I was.
There we go.
Yeah.
Motion for conceptual approval with final details by staff, with board and staff comments.
Do I have a second? Okay, Mr. Brown.
So for clarity.
I'm sorry, I was supposed to say the motion. Don't do this. All right, so the motion was for conceptual approval with board and staff comments, which includes your roof comment, with final details of staff.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, thank you. And so that, and the chair votes, so that would be 4-2-2.
Thank you. Thank you.
Approval with staff and board comments.
Thank you.
Final details.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, agenda number 6 is 161 East Bay Street, the Wagner Building. This is a Category 3 building in the French Quarter. in High District 3.5. It was constructed in 1880 and it's in the Old and Historic District. The application is requesting conceptual approval for rehabilitation of this three-story masonry structure and the addition of a rooftop amenity deck. Right, this is the location of the structure. And this is the building. We'll be looking at the doors on the ground floor and we'll be looking at the rooftop.
So just to clarify, that is all we're reviewing,
That is all we're reviewing tonight.
just those doors in the top.
Doors and rooftop.
Okay, very good. Sorry, that took 2 seconds to take care of that.
Where's the
So just another question.
Sure.
I thought that was all we were reviewing, but is this the first part of a larger project, or is this?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
And that's the
okay.
wording from the application.
Got it.
All right, hear from the applicant.
Good evening. I am Jimmy Walker with Walker Concepts, and I'm on the development design team. Architects of record are the HPA architects, the applicants out of Chicago. You probably have seen these drawings before. The project was, I believe, approved in 2018 with the roof deck design, and for reasons I'm unaware of, the project it stopped in mid construction. So most of the rooftop structures are already there. They're just unfinished. So what we're trying to do is we're making a couple of adjustments to what is already there, but we're trying to finish the finishes on what's already constructed. The newer thing that was not part of the previous submittals and approvals was we're taking another look at the ground floor doors where there'll be a restaurant space. I know those doors that exist now, I know they were replaced, gosh, I don't know what year that was, but maybe late 90s, something like that. So they need a lot of work or replacement already. And what this proposal would like to do is have custom doors that are similar, wood doors, but they would be in a bifold fashion so that they could open and not protrude into the sidewalk space, which the ones now currently do. So that's really the main things. If you want to flip forward on, there's some photos of the building now, top left, and then you can see some of the historic photos that's evolved over time. It really changed. And if you look at the photo, while you're zoomed in on that, I'm not sure exactly, but the photo to the right of this, Lawrence, okay. Hard to tell in this photo, but you can see some big openings there, like maybe there were doors that completely opened out that section. Not sure. It's hard to tell what was going on there because they either didn't exist or they completely were in swinging and you just can't see them in the photo. But if you go forward, you can see the construction that's in place now. That shows you the condition of the building now. There's been some interior structural work, stairwells and things like that. But the rooftop structure, you can see the deck framing is in place. There's there's 2 stair towers and an elevator shaft, and they're left unfinished. That doesn't change. To the left, previous design, I'm not sure exactly, I'm not familiar with what the intent of this was previously, but there's 2 levels that you're trying to make a transition between stairwells, and previously there was a large ramp area to make that transition to the elevator from one side to the next. And what our team would like to do is we're removing that and making that more just flat deck with a lift system to make the transition for ADA purposes and staircases. It's much simpler.
Jimmy, that's what exists now.
That's what's up there now. And all of this is set back. There's really, I've walked all around this building, and if you go pretty far south on East Bay, and you do see a little bit of the sloped stair wall now. It's covered in an orange material, so it really kind of stands out. And a little bit of the canopy structure there as you get down to, say, Prelo Street.
But all that's been approved.
It's been approved.
All that's been approved. So
we're only looking at the rate.
They were proposing some glass railings before of some type, and that's the other switch is more of a decorative. We prefer more decorative metal railing application. Go forward into the plan and kind of see the existing and the proposed roof deck. What's really changing there? That's some photos that I took with the structure finished out. That's north on East Bay. You really can't see any of it. Main Street, you definitely can't. To the west, just because of the. That's looking up. And drawing, how you pronounce that? You can barely see the stair tower and the elevator to the left. Posing, a stucco, simple stucco finish in a color that we want to blend in with the. Sort of disappear. That's what's existing now. So, I think if you go to the plan, that just explains the differences in the configuration of this roof deck. There's some screen walls that were approved that those weren't built, but we'll be building those to screen the large mechanical units. So the difference is really you've got that higher deck which was proposed before. The new railing, and then there's a simple lower deck instead of the ramping system that was there. The ground floor, you can see the difference between the doors. To the left, that's existing. Those were mahogany custom doors that were put in more recent years. Then these to the right, that's what they're proposing is more of a bifold that the way they would fold, they just would not project in the right of way. A lot cleaner and out of the way. And those would be custom wood, locally made doors. Go forward.
So Jimmy, let me ask you a question for you. If you want to go up to the top of that slide. There's something up there, a little bit more. Yeah, it says new exterior grade plaster mechanical screen beyond. I'm just interested. What does that mean?
There was a wall in the very back of the deck that was to be built to screen mechanical. That part was not built yet.
Okay.
We're picking it up to build it. So that
It's
it will screen the rooftop. There's a large unit now in place that's actually forward of that, and we want to move it on. We're not sure of the condition of it, so it's all being replaced in that screen area. Okay, move forward. Just Queen Street elevations. It's hard to see on that slide, but you can see the dashed lines of extent of the railings or handrail system that was proposed but not installed. Next. That's more of a large straight on view. couple of sections now. One difference here is there is a stairwell that is in that rooftop structure. Before, I believe it only went to the third level of the building. They're going to reconfigure it to where it goes all the way through, so it can be a full exit out of the building. Next. You can just go on to some enlarged elevations. They're proposing the custom doors. That's the bifold doors, but the transoms remain. And they're looking at some sort of decorative glass, which we'll have to make a selection of which one, but almost like a bubble looking glass for those doors at the street level.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question about these doors. They're bifold, they're wood, they're exterior. Are you required by code to make them DPI rated?
To make them, I'm sorry.
Wind? Hurricane rated?
Oh yeah, wind rated.
Yeah, they're bifold?
They would have to. They bifold out, but I'm not sure of the details of that.
Okay.
That's what they would like to propose. That's what they're looking at doing, something like that, so that we could have a clean, wide opening.
Yeah.
But they would still have to meet.
You cannot get that.
It's a different board.
Yeah.
I agree.
You know, a lot of, we've had to do some custom wood storefronts on historic buildings that not always tested, but they.
Well, I guess we're a little out of order, so I'll continue with the questions. Because I
Very
know,
simple.
and really, we're reviewing the doors and the rail. That's all we're reviewing. So I'm going to ask you a question about the doors, Jimmy. So I can't remember, but I was looking at it earlier today. It says Panic Hardware on a couple of these. How do you push these out if they're bifold? Not our worry. That's not going to change. How about this? Will that change the appearance?
The doors for one, but
Yeah. Will that change the appearance of any of the doors? Having them one of the egress.
it should not. It should not, because there's other exits out of the building.
Right.
For required exits. Why those were panic for the previous use, I'm not sure. Some of them do have bars on them.
So how that would work for
Well, I'm not sure, Eddie, because I don't know that every single one of those doors.
It's not.
We've
got two
I'll
called
reel
out.
that back in. This is a conceptual approval.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Mine
This
is
is the idea.
And so I'm confident Mr. Walker will get all that figured out. He's going to get a building permit.
Sorry.
Well, conceptual approval of the doors, which they may will not get it. I'm saying it's because the doors may will not work.
They may not.
So
My concern is that the doors are not consistent in appearance, even if they could work. That's my worry. But that's a next step.
Right.
We are out of order because I'm about to say something, but I'll hold off.
Sorry, it's my fault.
Eddie, but I think original kind of 40 years ago, I think that's how they look.
They look like this. Originally.
Kind of what I recollect. So,
Sorry.
yeah,
You're fine.
It's just pointing out that's the onus on that to make it work is on
That's
Mr.
right.
Walker.
That's next. Okay. Sorry.
This is what we would like to do. What's there is fine. These just seem that for the function, it's just cleaner. And if we have to replace them, we'd like to try something. It'd be much nicer looking. And so basically, I mean, that's it. Other than the materials being put on the walls and the roofs that were proposed before, that's really all there is. This approval and of course permit had expired. So for us to pick it up as a new development thing, we had to bring it back.
which is, so technically you're voting on all of it. But you should know it was approved in 2018 and these are the only changes.
So I misunderstood that. So technically, everything that we're looking at on the roof, even what's existing right now.
What's visible
That was approved.
that wasn't built
The permit.
in the 2018.
Back up for discussion.
Wasn't completed. Everything lapsed. That project.
Right, this team hasn't done any construction.
Yeah, just because I want to make sure I'm getting it. So technically, what's constructed up there, we should consider that not there, and that, because it's halfway done or a quarter of the way done.
Whatever part is not done is technically what you're voting on. Technically,
Wow.
if you guys didn't have an extension, which I should have checked, everything to check. So, but it matches the drawings from 2018, and with the exception of the rail, and part of the work was done.
Anything else for Mr. Walker at this time? Thank you, Mr. Walker. Is there any member of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda? Mr. Schwepp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Justin Schwartz with Historic Charleston. 2018 Historic Charleston was opposed to the application that was approved. I believe the roof deck and the rail were originally approved to be glass railings to minimize the visual impact of this building. Our concerns at that time were that the roof deck of this scale would have a negative impact on the visual character of the building, and the constructed material has proven that, in our opinion, particularly with the visibility from farther north on East Bay Street and from Benton. So we understand the applicant's desire to complete the construction, but we just ask that the board pays attention to the materiality and how that can be lightened to reduce the visual impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwepp. Further public comment, Ms. Minigan.
Erin Minigan with Preservation Society Charleston. In 2018 and 2019, I know it was 2019 because I was here and spoke on it. The Preservation Society staunchly opposed the request for a rooftop addition as well on this building. And unfortunately, we do feel that some of the modifications being proposed are a further step in the wrong direction. Specifically, we are very concerned that the change to a metal railing will greatly exacerbate the visibility of the rooftop amenity, which is demonstrated by the Gendron and Vendor range renderings, which are in the packet. So we urge for this to remain as a glass railing to help minimize that visibility. On the historic core of the building, the note to either restore or replace historic windows is insufficient. A thorough evaluation and window survey should be conducted to understand the scope of work with the goal to preserve and repair as much historic value as possible. And finally, the proposal to replace the ground floor doors with smaller light cuts and faux historic textured glazing is appropriate. Based on review of historic photographs, it appears these doors have historically had large format glazing similar to what exists on the building currently. So these doors should be repaired where possible, and if they are to be replaced with a design that matches what's there today. Thank you.
Further public comment on this item? Hold on, let me see where I am in my agenda, so that I know what I'm doing. Yeah. Was where I thought it was supposed to be. City staff comments and recommendations.
Okay. Start with number one. The board's purview of proposed work at the roof is limited to what is visible from a public street or right of way. The scope of work at the roof is similar to work previously reviewed and approved by VAR in 2018 or 19. The main revision may be a change from a glass guardrail to decorative metal guardrail, which would conceivably affect the visibility of the work. However, staff finds that any visibility of the roof will be minimal. And two, the scope of proposed work at the ground floor includes door replacement with 3/4 light panels with textured glass. While difficult to confirm, a 3/4 light system seems to appear in historic photos. However, the proportions of these discernible in the photos are different. The proposed textured glass as depicted in the provided image seems a bit too distorted and undesirable. BAR principles encourage the use of clear glass. Revise the glazing to be clear, not imitating old. 3, provide information on the existing doors, including their age, which I will say you did speak to, so thank you for that. And 4, if provided sauce-type hinges shall be used to conceal the hardware in the door panels. We are recommending conceptual approval for work on the rooftop and deferral for replacement doors as proposed.
Thank you, Mrs. Parrish. Mr. Walker, any response?
No, I mean, we could definitely, study the proportions of the doors, hardware is gonna be important. And get more information on how we replace that. It's just if we could do something like that, I think it would be very attractive. But I understand, and I think we're comfortable with the style of door that's there. It's just, we just felt like this is a better approach and something a little more attractive, especially at the sidewalk level. You know, the railings is just a matter of preference. We would like to just do more of a metal. We feel like when you look at a historic building like this, I mean, that would be something to be very common, but it's just a matter of preference that we want to do something more decorative for this use. That's basically.
And if I might go one more time.
Oh, okay.
I mean, no, thank you for that, because as we were talking about those doors, you know, the glazing is something that we continue to be concerned about. But in looking at those historic proportions and noticing, you know, they were not these narrow casement French style like doors. I didn't pick up from the packet that the reasoning was to make them bifolds for sidewalk encroachment. So that is something to consider.
Thank you. Board discussion and a vote on this item.
I'm sorry. Well, can you put up the photograph of the Wagner building from 1887? And I'm a little confused what the building to the left is. The picture to the left is not the same building. Right, just to go back to the slide there. Yeah. So if you zoom in, so I don't understand the lower left one. I don't know where that building is.
That lower left building is still extant, but it's 100.
That's not this building, though.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think it's.
So I don't know why that's shown. That's confusing to me, Jimmy. But anyway, but when I look at if you zoom in like you're doing, first of all, I like the idea and understand why they would want to open those doors. I think it would be very nice to do that on the street, have indoor outdoor. But it looks to me that the light cut's always been fairly large panels. And the doors that y'all have drawn are very attractive. It's just, that's what the building I think always had, and what you're proposing doesn't match. And so, normally if we've got a photograph, it's not conjecture, I've got to go with what it's a photograph. But I will say there may be a way where you can still open these and they're set. But they're set in such a way that they only encroach on the sidewalk 6 inches or something.
I think they were opening them.
Did they open it? Was there? Oh, well
them.
then, yeah, so.
I mean, fully rather than, it was not the best.
So then I would just continue and say that because the doors have always been, historically look like they've been larger paint, it's hard for me to be in support of a dramatically different looking door. So even though it's very attractive, the door is just not what is historically appropriate. I don't think you're going to see the railing, so like staff, I'm okay with that change. I'm not in support of the glass. I think that gives a little.
Yeah, glass will be reflective too, you know. Yeah. As much as it's there in the exposure.
I wasn't here for the other stuff that's already been approved, but if it's already been approved, I don't want to open it personally, but I don't want to have that. So
Did that include the glass rail, right?
It did, so they're changing that. That's what they want.
I'm just saying that was approved before.
Yes.
Okay, so it means that we're not approving everything that was approved.
We could fresh look at it and decide a little more.
And I mean, and frankly, I missed some of that. I didn't realize that we had a blank slate if we wanted it. I'm inclined to go with what was approved in 2018 kind of period. Just in support of renewals of applications like we do frequently. Because there was a conversation that was had during the presentation that we weren't part of. So I'm in support of approval of what they did in 2018. I think the doors are just too heavy. He's got them drawn now. And I think that leaving it like it is now, or like it is now, is the way it should be. And also, to me, when I think about textured glass, I mean, I think like you almost can't see through it. So, I mean, you can see through them now, and I can't imagine like not being able to see through that glass on that whole first floor sidewalk wall.
And then, don't worry, this is not going where you think it is. This is a conceptual approval, but it might be very helpful to the applicant in this case if we're talking about some novel use to have a sample of the material. So, because it's, I mean, one of my favorite buildings in Charleston that certainly stands out as I don't know if we called it certain, not grade one landmark, but it's a beautiful building.
It's conceptual approval, but we are looking actually at the.
That's right. The material is relevant.
So there is no concept here in the sense.
That's right. But I think that this, whether it's bubble glass or these antique glasses that have been described, that would be pretty dramatic change. It might be helpful to see it if that's actually what's contemplated. But I agree.
I got one more thing. So it's just that I'm not sure that I studied the 2018 approval enough to isolate something to pick out and take out. That's the point I wanted to make.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know that I would be against eliminating the class, but there's a certain fear for me of not trusting the decision that was made in 18.
That's fair enough. And I was just going to add to the end of my comments, I agree with staff's recommendation.
Can I ask, is this something that we could go straight to final and address this issue? Something this small?
I will make a motion. I will make a motion for conceptual approval for work at the rooftop. I'm going to deny the replacement of those, just to make it clear for the applicant, as submitted with final details to staff. And approval of all the other, whatever else was.
Mr. Bello, your motion was for conceptual approval for the work at the rooftop level, incorporating staff comments, and for a denial of the placement doors. Okay. Is there, as submitted, is there a second to that motion? Okay.
Just for clarification, sorry, I keep butting in. You said final details to staff, and I don't think that was in.
Thank you, with final details to staff regarding the rooftop. Right. Is there a second for that motion?
I will second.
Okay, we get some proper order.
So let me just, I think I'm just a little bit, conceptually, I think I'm okay with that. I just am wondering if I'm missing something from, and I looked at the drawings, right? And all we're looking at is that glass rail and the doors, which are denied. So that's off the table. What else is
Well,
there?
we're saying we would be approving the metal railing.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
right.
up on the roof,
Yeah.
on the roof.
And
Right.
substitute for the glass from 2018.
And I'm
But
just
they've
worried
got to
about
come back completely on
the doors.
ground level.
Ground
If they
level. But
want
is there
to-
any
if they
other,
want to change that.
is there any other modification that I might not have picked up on that?
I didn't pick up on any others.
Yeah.
That's just what I'm.
That's a fair question.
Not, that isn't internal.
And the denial is of the doors that you submitted. Maybe there's a better solution that's more in keeping, that helps you and the client. I didn't want it to be deferred and have it be quick.
Maybe we'll find another new photograph that crops up all the time, a new old photograph that crop up all the time. Okay, and so Mr. Meadows, you're satisfied?
Yes, so, but just one more question. So does that mean in this final details, I mean, Jimmy brings in something that Tory and Lawrence like with the doors, they can make those modification changes?
This is just as to the rooftop approval and the rooftop element, final review by staff.
I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, presumably there has to be a new presentation of doors if the doors are going to be changed. If that wants to change them.
Well, the intent was if they go back to the originally approved doors, it doesn't have to come back to the board on what's there, or if you're replacing them with doors that look exactly the same.
Right. If they don't change out.
Yeah.
That's right.
Then that, I'm trying to help them not have to come back for something, but I also want to make it clear that what they submitted is not support those doors.
Right, denial of the new doors as submitted.
That's correct.
Good. All right, that was a motion.
For staff to make a decision on the doors as a final. They don't
That's
have to
part of
come
final,
back for the
that's right.
doors.
That's right. But, I mean, presumably that would, but to be, again, to be clear, because I don't, you can either finish or refurbish the doors that are there or make exact replicas of those doors. Or there's gonna be another
And that
new
would require-
presentation from the applicant. That is my understanding of what we're talking about.
So if you bring in doors that look just like they are now, or replenish those doors, we'll do that at staff. Any other changes, including if they bring in doors that match the historic photos, they'll come to the board.
I think if they're trying to put a historic appearance back, that's our standard, they've got to come back before this board.
I think we're fine.
Just because this my part of it is, so you'll be looking at materials also.
Clear as mud.
So, Mr. Bellows' motion is clarified, it's still on the floor, and I believe, Ms. Sobchak, you seconded it even with those clarifications, correct?
Yeah, I understood that. Get those.
Yep. All right, Mr. Bellows, how do you vote on your motion?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Brown?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Bennett? Ms. Sobchak?
Yeah, okay.
And myself, yea in favor. Like with that, we'll look forward to working with you to get this squared away.
Great, thank you very much.
Number 7 is 609 King Street. This is the Liberty Healthcare.
This one out, just kidding. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Are you okay, John? James, if I give the introduction? Okay.
You leaving? So this one's a good one. Discussion on this one.
Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to introduce number 7, which is 609 King Street, Liberty Healthcare. If you think back to the previous meeting, we broke this preliminary review into 2 portions: the big building, and then the smaller, well, not secondary, but smaller portions that face St. Philip and Spring Street. So this is new construction and for preliminary. Hannon Alley Borough Neighborhood High Districts 4 and 6 Old and Historic District. Requesting preliminary approval for new construction of 2 attached secondary portions of the main building on Spring and St. Philip Streets and 1 standalone building on St. Philip Street. And in case you don't know where this is at this point, everyone, this is where this will be. This is the King Street part. Mr. Gal?
Thank you. We're excited here today. We're looking for preliminary approval of smaller sections of this building. And I'm here today with Ted and Greg from LS3P. Gary and Scott are going to do the heavy lifting of the presentation, and we have the owners of Liberty Senior Living here. Would you go to slide 4, please? Yes, so just a brief introduction. We're going to go from the bottom of the page in red. Spring Street, that's the main vehicular entrance, so that we don't have trucks going in, and that's adjacent to a small building that will have an art studio and some residential spaces above, and then a larger section that connects back to the King Street building. And then moving clockwise, we have garden flats, which are 3 residential units on a parcel all by itself. And then the next at 9 o'clock is the healthcare building. Senior living has their independent living and assisted living, and then there'll be healthcare components. So this is the part of the project that will have its own entrance and its own character, so to speak. So I'll let Gary give you the details. Thank you.
We're happy to be back, and I'm going to try to go rather quickly. And if you'd like, after each of the individual building presentations, I can pause to answer any questions, or even if you want to vote building by building. Can you go next, please? So the comments were for the Spring Street building, provide appropriate landscaping and hardscaping to dress up a particular entry. Shutters should be placed consistently, and then first floor, 3-story building appears squatting could be studied. Next, please. So this is a perspective looking down Spring Street to the east. And just a reminder, the design that was approved at conceptual was a 3-story building that takes on the character of the houses on Spring Street, with a taller building set back, which has the character of the main building that was approved for preliminary. Next. This is the site plan. Scott will talk about it further, but the building that fronts on Spring Street is the 3-story townhouse type building with the taller building behind it, which you drive into to get to the main entry. Next, please. And then just taking through the plans. Next, please. Next. And the roof plan. Next. To go over the elevations. So this is an overall street elevation. On the top is what was presented at conceptual, and at the bottom is the further development showing what we're proposing for preliminary. Next. And on the left is a larger scale of what was presented at conceptual, and then what's proposed on the right for preliminary. So starting with the 3-story building, the major change is that at the ground level, at the client's good recommendation, they decided to turn it into retail, and it might be a art gallery. So the windows have been designed to be more like a storefront with an awning rather than the earlier design. It was double hung windows. Most everything else about the design has stayed the same with some developments. Next. Scott, do you want to talk about the site plan?
Yes, thank you. So the big change on the site plan is to the west of the building. We now have a garden walk for pedestrians that will bring you from Spring Street back into the center of the project. And so the walk will have gardens on the left, and as you move further in, actually a portion of it, you're actually walking within the building, open air, looking out through some arches to the garden. We've also, on the board's recommendation, extended the site improvements to the entry drive up under the building, so that previously we had a change where you went under the building, now it extends all the way through. And you notice we have trees planted on either side of that, so it really feels like a garden court associated with a smaller structure.
Next, please. So this is the proposed design at a larger scale with the storefront at the ground level and a single door, treating the base as a paneled expression with an awning and a horizontal entablature, and above it on the parlor level are taller windows with operable louver shutters, and on the third level are slightly smaller double hung windows. Next. The materials are clapboard, casings, traditional 3-part cornice, operable shutters with pintles and shutter dogs, and hinges. And you can see the palette that's being proposed. We are proposing, and we're still finalizing the colors, but the general idea is that it would be a lighter color so that it would look distinct from the brick building behind it. Next, please. And here you can see in an overall elevation with a section, the brick building behind it is pretty close to what was presented at preliminary or conceptual, although we have taken the details of the taller building that was approved and we've wrapped it around so it would be consistent on this side. Next, please. So some typical details through eaves. Next, please. Very good.
Close it and reopen it.
Won't be held against your time. Hang tough while we try to.
It's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And I think it's your final thoughts. I think you should do your stand-up comedy routine.
Were we on this page?
No, I think this is the first page.
Yes. Back a little bit. Back to the previous.
You're right.
Ooh.
That's the second building.
Yep. We got it.
Almost
Okay,
there.
we're almost there.
Yeah, okay. Almost.
Might be better to use the arrows again. Do you want us to go up or back, forward or backward?
Backwards, please.
Okay.
I think it's a few more back.
Oh my gosh.
Let's skip that slide. Let's go with that one.
You think it's a bad slide in there?
Well, there's a bad slide.
The good thing is that we've all received these and
Yeah.
reviewed them as well.
I'm looking at it again. While we're waiting, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So, you said the materials are clapboard. Is that wood? Is that hardy plank? What is that?
What we're calling out is cementitious fiberboard, right?
Okay.
Duration.
Yeah,
How thick?
And so it would be clapboard it's clapboard on the upper levels and clapboard on the lower levels, and then similar materials for the forces and the cornices.
so all the trim, boards, all that would be out of the cementitious fiber
Yes.
inside.
And the idea is that
It's called manufacturing.
duration. And if we can find stock profiles that are similar to what we are proposing, we will use those, and if we can't, we will run custom
For the trim.
for the trim.
And this, while I'm talking, just getting a little bit ahead on the masonry building, we've got the cornice. Is that stucco? I didn't see the detail for that.
I know that's
Is that precast?
precast. So, and I think that what we're talking about is a precast assembly, like we were doing on the Line Street project under construction for the main building.
I got you. Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Can't make any promises right this second.
So this is the second building. So,
Oh. So we need to go back.
so I don't think we could go.
oh, we'll just do one.
Keep going.
Okay.
I wouldn't go back.
I wouldn't go back to that.
Yeah.
that slide.
No, let's
Okay. Yeah.
let 206 is next.
What's that?
We remember.
Okay.
They've seen it and studied
Okay,
it,
so-
so we might be safe
I've
to
got
stay
it
away
right
from that.
Okay. So, I probably don't need to go through the rest of the presentation slides. Do you want to talk about your comments associated with this building, or would you like us to go through all three and then circle back at the end?
I think that was a fine suggestion, Mr. Brewer, but
Okay.
just because of how we've traditionally done it, I think we'll vote on them all at once. Good idea.
Oh, okay.
So I would, and if you need an extension of time, which I'd expect, the scope of this, that's fine, but I think we would vote on them as one ultimately, unless I get a strong sense of my board.
I agree.
Okay. So please go right ahead.
Okay, so the second building is facing St. Philip Street. The last building that we sort of showed is attached to the main building. This building is a freestanding building on St. Philip Street, and here you can see a rendering of it looking south on St. Philip with the new building, which is adjacent to what we call the healthcare building. Next, please. So the staff comments were scale issues with the second story windows and adjacent buildings and restudied windows and shutters. Next, please. And it's a freestanding building. Scott will talk about the site plan shortly. Next. So it is a small apartment building with 3 flats on each floor, or 1 flat on each floor, 3 total. Next, please. And this is the before elevation on the top and the proposed elevation on the bottom. It is the building on the right-hand side. Next, please. And then this is a slightly larger scale. On the top is what was presented at conceptual. The changes that we've made is we have introduced a piazza to the south. So it looks more like a Charleston single house. It makes the proportions more vertical. Next, please. And Scott, you want to talk about the slide?
Yeah, so there's a very intimate garden path to the south along the edge of the porch that Gary just mentioned. And it leads to a garden on the east that has a fountain, and it's an opportunity to get some trees in there. And actually, the garden on the east is going to be enjoyed by all of the residents of the larger facility, not just the folks in these 3 units. So quite simple, new garden walls where we adjoin the existing properties, both to the north and south.
And to the north is an existing house, so the north elevation is mostly obscured, and to the south is an existing house, so the south elevation of the new building is mostly obscured. Next, please. So this is the proposed design and the materials that are very similar to what we kind of reviewed on Spring Street, but you can see with the change in the add of the piazza, it makes the proportions look taller and more narrow, and each of the units on the second and third floor have a small porch facing south and west. Next. The materials are, again, clapboard, double hung windows with traditional muntins, simulated divided light, casings, operable shutters with pimples and shutter dogs, and then traditional 3-part eave and corner boards. Next, please. And then the sections through the building, the street. Next, please. And then larger scale and details that we're working on with LS3P. Next, please. And then the side elevations. This is the north elevation. The dotted line represents the adjacent house. So we've broken it into a 5-bay mass with the back bustle being 2 bays, which we have simplified. Next, please. And then the elevation that faces south is similar, but here you can see a 1-bay porch. The dotted line represents the adjacent house to the south. And then on the right-hand side is the east elevation that faces towards the main building and the garden that Scott just described. Next. And then finally, moving to what we call the healthcare building, which is the bigger, the larger footprint building. Next, please. The staff comments were a scale issue with the second-story windows and the adjacent buildings and restudied windows and shutters. And this is the building that we spent the most time on and are proposing something that's significantly different than what we presented at conceptual. And that's after meeting with staff, Historic Charleston, and the Preservation Society. Next, please. So the proposed design is proposing that the facing St. Philip Street, we have a 2-story mass with a setback at the 3rd floor, so that the height of this building at the first 2 stories is more compatible with the height of the adjacent houses. Next, please. And here is the site plan. There's one coming up later that Scott will describe, but On the north side is a main entry, vehicular entry, and then in the gray is a piazza that pedestrians can circulate underneath. Next, please. And then just taking through the plans, next. 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 So the overall, can you go back one, please? So the earlier design, which you can see on the top here, was 3 stories with no setback. And the proposed design, which is on the bottom, is 2 stories with a setback. And the reason we did that, and we did do studies of the design on the top where we made the windows smaller. The issue is programmatically this building needs to connect back to the main building because the ground floor and the second floor have healthcare components that need to connect into the main building. The third floor are apartments, and that's where we were able to, with the team and the people that we met with from the city, propose a design where there is a setback there. And by doing that, the client and developer is giving up a little bit of square footage to respond to a smaller building that we think responds better to the historic houses. Next, please. So we are also looking at the buildings that we're working on with Greystar. Building number, affectionately known as number 3 on the left-hand side is 3 stories. Building number 4, which is in the middle, is 4 stories, and that building utilizes a setback at the 4th floor, similar to what we are now proposing for the new healthcare building, which you can see on the right. Next, please. And we want to be mindful of these 3 larger footprint buildings being added to St. Philip Street so that each of them has their own unique look and paint color scheme. As part of the design, we decided on this building with a setback that we would eliminate the gables that were part of the previous design because the Greystar building number 4 has a similar expression and it's near this building and we did not want them to look similar. Next, please. Stop.
So from the site plan, we did a lot of pushing and pulling to be sure that we had a very gracious entry for pedestrians as well as for vehicular movement into the site. And so pedestrian movement actually occurs under the porch on the north side of the building. So it connects from St. Philip into the interior courtyard. We have a planting bed at the base of that that helps define where the vehicular drop-off is for the building. And then we were able to get enough space to plant some trees on the northern edge as well. Similar treatment with the paving materials that extend all the way into the site and up under the main building.
So here is the proposed elevation. You can see at the ground floor, it's treated with storefronts, which are almost identical to what was proposed at the conceptual phase. Those storefronts reflect that the ground level is offices and the healthcare part of the building. On the second floor, we've treated it with double hung windows and operable shutters and clapboard. And then you can see between the second floor and the third floor that there's a setback so that the main eve of the building reads as the second floor, which ideally is helping to lower the height of the look of the building in relationship to the adjacent houses. Next, please. And then moving around to the north side, this is off of the road in, and there's a drop-off where the canopy is shown. And behind the arched openings is the open-air piazza that pedestrians can circulate through. Above the canopy is an inset porch with classical square columns with a 2-bay pavilion on either side of the entry that is bookending. And then between the second and third, there is also a recess here as well. Next, please, or the floor sits back. This building on the south is adjacent to another building, so most of it is hidden from the pedestrian view, but we have taken the main entablature between the second and third floor, wrapped it around. We have treated the pavilions On either side is a 3-bay pavilion, and then we have introduced some trellises for planting along the side. Next week. And then this is showing materials, again, responding to the material palette that one would see with the residential buildings in St. Philip, with the storefront. The interesting thing about the storefront that we looked at is, and I understand from the local people that we're working with, is that St. Philip is one of the streets in Charleston that has the biggest combination of residential and commercial. So we counted that there were 7 different existing historic buildings with storefronts, and we thought that the storefront design being proposed ties into that and also reflects the program that's actually on this. And it, the great thing about Charleston is having a mixed-use community where there's residential and there's commercial on the same street. Next, please. And then materials, we're showing, and it's not really that pink, but suggestion of a light color building with gray green shutters and green windows and an awning and a brick, a handmade wood molded brick at the base. Next, please. And then sections through on the right, you can see the setback between the 2nd and 3rd floor that becomes a terrace for the 3rd floor apartment. Next, please. And then some of the details through the cornice, which is a 3-part cornice with a sign monochrome and a bed mold and frieze and architrave. Next, please. And then here's the perspective. So you can see facing St. Philip Street, there are 2 pavilions with the retail storefront facing St. Philip. You can see hopefully how the setback at the 3rd floor helps to reduce the height of the building in comparison to the adjacent houses. And then when it turns the corner on the north facade with the arches and the porches and the canopy, that is the main entry into the building with the vehicular access beyond. Next, please. So those are the 3 buildings, and we're happy to be back and showing the development of the project. So we open up to comments and everyone's thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. All right, public comments. Ms. Milligan.
And my name is the Preservation Society of Charleston. We'd like to thank the applicant for reaching out and meeting with us to discuss changes since the previous proposal. Generally, we feel the designs have progressed nicely, and in particular, the change to Spring Street to incorporate a storefront on the building is very positive. Our previous comments regarding the larger building on St. Philip Street centered on concerns that it reads too commercial for the neighborhood context. Modifications to the design, including the introduction of the arched arcade, step parapets, and balustrade at the roof line, and cantilevered awning at the north elevation, in conjunction with the large storefront windows and awnings, add to the commercial feeling of the building and make it feel further out of context. The design should be toned down and simplified to better relate to the residential setting. Finally, we appreciate the effort to reduce the scale of the building by setting back the 3rd story, but we are concerned 7 feet does not create a sufficient enough relief for the building to truly read as a 2-story mass on the streetscape. We encourage studying setting back the top floor further to create a more authentic modulation of the massing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bennigan. Further public comment?
Justin Schroeder, Historic Charleston. We appreciate the applicants meeting with us early on in the design process to review the changes to the building. We really appreciate the changes to a commercial frontage on Spring Street, and especially the reduction or setback in height on the St. Philip Street building. So we're comfortable with recommending conceptual approval.
Thank you, Mr. Schwebler. Further public comment? Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendations?
So a couple of notes for you to consider. Number 1, the previous concerns by staff and board have been answered. The staff is comfortable with the revisions. Perhaps the largest revision occurred at 212 St. Philip, where there previously existed a scale issue with the adjacent buildings, evident in height and with building elements. To combat this, the 3rd story has been recessed, making the building mass more compatible with the streetscape. The roof design has also changed, lowering the overall building height. The building facades have been revised, and the new unique design will provide more variety from similar sized new buildings to the north. I'd like to reiterate that while a conceptual review, we talk about height, scale, mass, general architectural direction. The best way to handle these revisions to this building, which maybe border on some massing changes, is to consider the fact that those massing changes were subtractive, and that the easiest way to handle this very complex, very large application is to keep these three pieces grouped together. So under our direction, we told the applicant to come back with those at preliminary. Second note, staff has reviewed the individual color chips on a fan deck for every color that's proposed. And I know that some of them appear a little bit brighter, especially some of the greens and some of the tans appear pinkish. I am very conservative with exterior color, and I looked at every single one, and I have no concerns over the proposed color palettes. The board should, however, determine if any element or portion of these buildings needs to be part of a mock-up. Okay. And the actual comments, number one, at 206 St. Philip, omit the trim band and keep the water table or revise the full ground floor to be a base. Usually when a cornice is located in that position, it aligns with the storefront as it does on the third building. And so consider whether that trim band needs to be there or the water table or both. 2, proposed materials or any alterations to the proposed material shall be provided and reviewed by the final review in order to keep the mock-up for workmanship. That's a really big thing we're pushing. And number 3, which I don't have on the slide, but exterior materials should wrap the portico share of the tunnel under the first building that we looked at. They should wrap the interior. And with that, we're recommending preliminary approval with your and our comments.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish. Would the applicant care to respond? Good, thank you. Board discussion.
So I want to ask you, Lars, just to bring up a few slides, and I'll leave my comments.
Can't bring up the Black Coast line.
We can't go too far back.
Sheet 21. Sheet 20. Gary is pretty much the same comment on this page.
Is that a page number you see on the screen or a page number from your PDF?
I don't know. So.
Yeah, it would be sheet 21 on the PDF that y'all provided.
So our PDF is all combined, all applications, so we don't have that same page number unless it's printed on the page.
What's the page number on their sheet?
Yeah.
Our base numbers are numbered on each.
Also 21.
Oh, okay. Let's go way back.
Yeah.
Pull up the, So we're still in landscape. We need to go back to probably the 240s if I remember. This better be good, James. We will go to as many pages as you want. Oh, we've gone too far now.
What side is that?
There's like 230 something, 240 something.
The Spring Street.
This is the Spring Street side.
Wait, let's go. That's not the pattern. That's where we kept getting worked out.
I think 241 is the map.
Yeah, let's stay past 241. Okay. Let's start with that one. See what page number that is.
I would almost, if we can't get these, Gary, almost all
We're,
of
we're gonna
these
get it. Yeah.
are,
We're real close.
the top of the parapet, and when the parapet comes in to get to the middle, and there's a rise, and it goes back down. Yeah. We consider that just being flat, not having that decorative rise in the middle.
At the top of the
Yeah.
building?
Yeah, at the top, well, and I'm looking at the top of the three-story forefront, storefront on page 21. You know, so you have the storefront, and then two windows, and then there's a little parapet right. And when you go above that, there's a parapet at the top of the 5-story brick building. And those two protrude forward.
Oh, the step, the step that goes
Yeah.
up to the.
At the
Yes.
taller building.
Well, it's at the lower building also.
Or you're asking if that's required.
Right. I mean, if that can be, just
I remember what.
more simple, just straight across. There's 24.
We're talking about up here.
And.
There's 23. We're getting close.
So, I wonder if I get all,
So, Gary, let me show it to you on this computer. This page 21.
Is it at?
It's right here. This right here.
Okay.
And that right here.
Okay, we can look at that.
Just because that would make all this mention.
The one thing about this, James, is that this connects to the rest of the larger building that does have that detail. And so maybe the other option would be to get rid of the gable portion of it and just flatten it out, but we could study both of those.
Okay, so look, page 22.
and by the way, this is great, James. I appreciate you working with everybody. Make sure everybody's speaking loud enough so that all this is taken on the record instead of off the record conversation.
It's 21, 22. Same thing. So I know you were mentioning it was on, but that's, I'm also looking at that. Could, that's what you're being saying.
Yeah.
You see a little bit here. Page 24. Same here. Here. And I know that's what you were talking about. Trying to continue all the way around, but could get the simplicity of that.
Yeah, we could look at that.
25.
Are you following that? It's
I
the
got- yep.
step of the
It's the
parapet.
step
We're all-
parapet on the back of the large
Just the
building.
step up portion.
On the sides and on the
Yeah.
front.
Yeah.
On the side.
The little
Typically
building.
would not have a step parapet on a.
The high ones, the low
non-front
ones,
facade.
it's step heavy.
Step
It's step height.
We need to de-step.
So,
Well, the one thing I was pointing out, and maybe you didn't hear, is that the red brick building relates to the other sides of the building where it does have that step parapet. But we could study sort of on this part, potentially not having that detail.
32.
No step.
No, corner, no, 32, is this page 32?
Yep.
Okay, the cornice, these pediments above the windows here and here and here, and I haven't had a volume sheet, I mean, could they, do we have to have those accented pediments?
Look at page 34.
Yeah, that's what we're on. And so, I mean, do we have to have that heaviness at the top?
It's something like this. So just to add a little bit, and I'm going to be agreeing with you, but just to kind of jump in, just so we save a little bit of time and my screen's a little bit bigger. So I didn't see any of the first part, so I don't want to have you guys go backwards, but I appreciate the changes that were made, the step back, some of the other moves. I think they're good. Also, very much appreciate the attention to hardscapes. I think that's going to be critical to the success. So thank you, Scott, for that. I have a little bit of an issue. This is me probably with the high style of these buildings. This neighborhood, actually, my office is in this neighborhood. I walk this block. I go to that pizza place just once a week, and self-Sanders. And again, the designs look great, but I think I would like to see them. If you walk around that neighborhood, it's a very diverse collection of architectural styles, but not very many are this high style. We don't have
almost tripart, triple hung windows or tall windows with a panel and shutters. That's like what you see on the Roper House on, down by Battery. You don't see that up in this neighborhood. Probably the most decorated buildings are Victorian. So I'm not saying you can't have it, but I struggle with that because everyone's like, well, this is the official if it's in the neighborhood. It really doesn't. It's that style. So I would ask that, and this is just me, the board can totally agree, that as you go to the next level, that you scale it back a little bit. Also, my concern is all this is out of hardy plank or cementitious side. You've got a lot of panels, and I'm afraid to go to one of the pages. Sorry, I hijacked your thing, James. But you've got a lot of panelization. There's an arch with a panel, a corner. One building, you've got these corner boards that are this big with panels. But first of all, the corner boards, I don't know any building in Charleston. There might be a couple. There aren't any in that neighborhood that have that detail, much less when you have a 5 to 8 inch recess. I think over time it won't look as good as it does in your drawings. So sort of twofold. One, I think it's a little more high style for that neighborhood. So I just ask you to sort of give it a once over as you go to final. And then I think that high style lends itself better to better materials, and you can't do the better materials unless they kind of go together. So I know I would struggle with it walking by or seeing this. It seems a little bit out. But I don't think it's for deferral. I think it's just as you get to the next.
Yeah, I mean that's a triangle response.
Yeah.
Sure. Let me finish.
Sorry, James.
Back to let me finish showing these things.
What page do you want?
So I think that the corner boards are too wide.
Right.
They're almost as wide as the column.
Yeah.
And so it looks like that should be a little less than here and here. And I compare that and that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the competition with elements here with the heavy corners here. In one joint, it almost looked like they were touching. Then I went to a close up and they weren't. But it was close. I was just talking about the actual build and the flash. And then the last one was 52. And I don't have a copy of that. Thank you.
But James, what you're saying is very similar to what I'm saying. So on that one building, you've got a corner board that looks like it's bigger than 12 inches. I don't know how you can get that for one thing, but also it's not in character with the neighborhood. We don't have that in other places. Not that I'm aware of. It's not very common. And so I think going to get stronger, that was something. I want to be playing. I appreciate your attention to that. But I just think it would be more in keeping, and I think it would, over time, weather that. Okay. You can totally argue with me.
No, I think the points you make are well made. I mean, the response would be that the comments that we had on the 3 buildings for the conceptual review were sort of minimal, and they did not raise the issue of high style, although that may be an issue now. And so coming back to preliminary, we were addressing the comments that we heard at conceptual. And so now we're in a situation where there are new comments because there's another board member that was at the first meeting. But I think that the point about the parapets we can look at is our final. The same thing with the corner boards, and that maybe there are things that we can do to slightly modify each of the elevations to push it in a more, I hate the word vernacular, but more to being sort of consistent with the buildings that we see in the neighborhood. The one thing to keep in mind is these buildings are bigger, they're bigger footprints, and when you enlarge them, my feeling is that they would benefit from more detail rather than less detail in comparison to the very small footprint and lower height houses that are on State Road Street.
See, Gary, I think that's exactly right if you were using the real material. But when it's reduced to cementitious material and we're starting with 5/8 inch and then it's expanded to massive buildings, in my mind, that rule doesn't play. But I agree with you if you're using full dimension materials, like if we were looking at a 200-year-old building, you would see real depths, in between the edge of your corner board and the base of your siding. It's just different because you're using real dimension material.
And I would argue sometimes there's extra detail made the building stand out more than actually. And again, especially if we had a, if you took these buildings, pull them south, did that.
Well, we
I
can
would
have
have those
that.
comments.
I mean, my feeling, and I don't live in Charleston, but every time I walk by a historic building, I see the richness of details, and I never once look at one of those buildings and think, God, I wish I had less detail.
Well,
So-
and I agree, but that's when you have these real full depths, so that you have appropriate recesses, and when you begin to use these not full dimension materials, you don't see the same thing. Because I agree with what you said.
And if you walk up and down Spring Street, which I do every day, they aren't, there's not a lot of high style detail.
So it's all about the context.
That's my
Again, again, and in my mind, the third building with the arches, that is very overreached. So it's a lot of detailing, which is probably not fully competing.
Well, to be fair to the applicant, I think that this has been the classic dilemma with this project of the scale, where you are in fact trying to build something very high end. We have something that's going to be on a different side or different elevation of this same project is going to change the skyline part of Charleston, and they're trying to get elements to scale down to the neighborhood. I think the applicants have come a long way in trying to square that circle, and that there's no perfect way to do it. But it sounds like everyone here is saying, well, we'll consider those things. Simplification, and certainly consider durability of the materials in this building will always look as fresh as it does in your drawing.
Mr. Chairman, it's been a conflict from the very beginning when we use precedents that are outstanding, right? And if you're using those same materials in your application, it would have been a more seamless process. But you're forced to, because of cost, use other materials. And it's the same general application, but the dimensions of those materials are simply different, which makes that appearance not as rich. And that's where the conflict comes in, because your precedents that's used, almost every precedent used are my favorite buildings, right? But then when you take the scale of all of that and then apply it to the veneer on your buildings, it's just different because of the materials that you have to use. And I mean, I get it. But I don't feel quite as strongly as that. My comments were just limited to what I made to you. Okay. So,
Well, and again, to clarify, I'm not recommending, I'm going to be in support of approving. It's, and again, it's kind of fair, I just showed up. So. But I would ask, and I don't want you to script it down, I always ask as you take it to the next level, which is not that far off, that you consider some of those things. And maybe, walk around these blocks a little bit more than just the fancy stuff.
But again, the third building is a little bit.
What's that?
The third building is arches, and the bigger building is. I think it's much more to look at it. So maybe we can.
And to reiterate, the general architectural direction of that building has changed. So, I mean, it's, in my opinion, fair for you to talk about that.
We're talking about the healthcare building.
Healthcare, yeah. And I wasn't around for the first part, but I do think that the setback was a very good.
Finally going to the healthcare building.
That's fine.
The height stuff, too much arches and stuff was your word.
Again, the context of that is not. Do we have arches on other buildings?
We have them actually up that block. So that was going to be part of my comment, is that there are arches at two buildings right at St. Philip and Lime Street. So that actually fits in with me. The only thing that I was going to say about that building is the awning. I don't think that I can think of any awning that's in that neighborhood for any corner or for a solid facade. So to strip that.
Arches on the new building.
Yeah.
The line, Central Branch.
One of them is. One category. Oh, well, you know what? It's part of the context now.
Anyway, I'm not anti-arch. I don't. You already heard my comment.
Sure.
The awning is, you're right, there are no awnings, but the the storefront faces west.
Hmm.
And so the awning seemed like a logical thing. The other thing about the awning is it's very hot here in the summer, and it's a great pedestrian way to, make it more pleasant to walk along the sidewalk. The issue about the arches is exactly what you're pointing out, and we think of this building in comparison to the other two buildings as more of a civic building. And we thought that the arches helped to make it look different than what we were doing elsewhere. We thought that the arches helped to identify that it's actually the north side of the building that was the main entry. And so we could study, deleting the arches, but it just seems, for the reason I just explained, the rationale. Plus, we thought it was good.
Yeah, I like the arches. I don't like the awning.
And again, in Mr. Brewer's defense, I'll have to say that I think one of the greatest vernacular losses in architecture in Charleston is the awnings that we have for commercial streets. Yeah, that's right. So
in New York City, all Fifth Avenue, all the tall buildings, once that awnings.
yeah. So further board comments?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
for preliminary approval.
A preliminary approval incorporating board and staff. And I may have cut you off, James. I
For
apologize.
the new construction. I'm used to it now. Preliminary approval.
I'm gonna cut you off doing your motion too.
Preliminary approval for new construction and as laid out in the application. Good board staff.
Preliminary approval with board and staff. Okay, very good.
I'll second that.
Second, Mr. Bellin, motion's in order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on this motion?
Yea in favor.
Ms. Sobchak?
Yeah.
Mr. Bellin?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Matters? And myself, yea in favor. Thank you to the applicant.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's very strange.
Thank you.
It's a bad slide. It's
It
in memory.
happened every time we get in the
Shut it
two
down.
thirties. It's super odd.
I was supposed to leave this out.
I know.
No big deal.
Thanks for coming.
And our final
Always
item.
a pleasure.
Yes, always, yes. I will come disrupt things next time.
You used this before? I have.
We have plenty of those.
Yeah, no. I have. I just
It's
wanted
pretty
to-
good stuff.
It is. You know.
For your siding, do you have any questions?
Can I ask? Sure.
That's what I'm-
Thank you for helping us.
Thank you. You know.
Good comments.
I know what you're
as
getting
always.
at.
Happy New Year.
No, I'm with you.
All right,
Thanks.
let's power through.
Number 8, 425 Meeting Street Limited. This is an unrated structure. Well, it's not rated. It's in the Cannonboro Elliottburg neighborhood. It was constructed in 2013. This is called It's in the ordinance district. This application was requested by the applicant to be reviewed by the board.
Okay, very good. Mr.
David Pinero.
Yeah, Mr. Panera, good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
You have the floor when you're ready.
Thank you.
You have contact. I'm sorry, Tori. No.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, I have contact. Sorry.
1 second.
This is the location of the building. That's the topmost corner is where we'll be looking. And this corner is the general area we'll be looking at. Fin will be an important feature. And this canopy awning. And a little bit of context for you. Actually, the last image was the residential on the east, so from Wolf Street.
Very good.
So, Mr. Chairman, so y'all have informally denied this.
I am incorrect in saying that.
Okay.
That's why I've changed my comments. So this one was, this was submitted for the board to review, and to your, to anyone's credit here, we've been talking about how we'll create some protocol so that all signs come through staff before they come to you.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a little bit of they're working on policy. Mr. Panera, now you have.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So we have a sign package here in regards to this location. As you follow through the slide, the next slide here, you have the color scheme in regards to their branding. If you want to go ahead and hit the next slide for us. You'll see the Pantone colors and the gradients and kind of the feel of their color scheme, their style, their etc.
Your next slide will show us kind of a site map of what we're proposing, which is going to be various letter sets, wraps, and door vinyl. Then you can go to the next slide. So this is that thin. It's being accented by the wrap. So this is going to be a white wrap with three-dimensional letters, and then the street side will have also another wrap with that gradient to kind of match the overall feel of the logo, etc. And then the sidewalk street view will have another three-dimensional letter set there as well. The doors are highlighted here, but there's more context in regards to that on some future slides. And that is the big overview of all of the signage that we're evaluating today. The next slide shows the side view of the three-dimensional letters. There are some details on the side view, how it's arching, etc. That one showing the top view and the bottom view. Again, a lot of the gradient, a lot of the same styling. And then the next slide is specifying the pin itself. So you'll have the one side white, the end view, the gradient, and then the other side white to go back to that overall look. And then the next slide are the doors. So this is going to be vinyl graphics. And then the next slide are more vinyl graphics, translucent vinyl. And then the white doors are sliding doors. So these are going to be moving doors. And then the final slide would be the under canopy, where again it's mirroring all of the gradient color schemes underneath. So you'll have that presence, I guess, when you're walking up to the site. So that would complete the whole sign package and everything like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Panera. No one here for public comment. City staff comments and recommendations.
And I'd first like to say thank you for sitting through a very long meeting. My comments are going to be a little bit harsh, but much credit to you for sitting through a meeting for your client, and it is a much creative approach. So number one, sub-comment, as stated in the BAR general sign policy statement, signs should respect the size, scale, and design of the building. The policy statement also reads that signs should not obscure significant architectural features. The proposed vinyl wraps do not respect the design of the building and the architectural feature that is the corner. Number two, the surface of the existing vertical fin is metal panel with the texture, color, and pattern matching the remainder of the building. While the proposed logos on the fin are suitable and essentially replace the existing logos, omit the vinyl which is proposed to fully wrap the fin. Three, the translucent storefront glazing is also part of an overall architectural feature that is seamless with the overall building. Omit the white vinyl door coverings and the colorful storefront window coverings. Four, per BAR sign standards, no more than 20% of any single window area may be occupied by signage. Also, it is intended that window signs not block visibility into a business. The proposed storefront vinyl covers 100% of all windows at the corner. Five, the translucent canopy is part of an overall architectural feature that is seamless with the overall building. Omit the vinyl ceiling wraps on the canopy. This is bordering on being more of an architectural alteration. Six, according to the ordinance, the grounds for considering a design inappropriate include the effect of intense or lurid colors, violent contrast of colors, and the absence of unity and visual compatibility. Rather than harmonizing with the proposed is intensely incompatible with the design of the building. And seven, the building corner is muted as existing, and any changes of this degree would be visible from the residential area on Wolf Street. So this should be taken into consideration. So we're recommending denial. Sorry, I had to sit through that after sitting here all night.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess my only comment would be removing what you're stating on here. Would the letter sets be a staff level, evaluation. And if we were to go into compliance of the 20% rule, would that be something that you guys could approve at staff level versus going to the board? And to comment on the full graphics left to right of the whole glass, I think we were trying
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we're looking to hear another presentation about another design right now.
Well, but hold on. Mr. Caneros has done previously, I think, is trying to bring this into compliance, and I think he's hearing these remarks for the first time, right? So
Yes, he
I would,
is.
since he has applicant rebuttal period, just like anything else, I would take his questions and see if Tori can inform him.
Because I also have a few questions
I was
as well.
actually just thinking about, I want you to feel like you're in a bind
Oh,
about
yeah.
making a decision.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I would say that,
Is he finished?
oh yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh yeah, no problem. So I think with the vinyl and the letter sets in general, I think the translucent aspect of the glass was trying to make it not block out the entire glass, so it would still be safe and it'd still have the viewing back and forth. But in all reality, I do understand that it is covering the whole glass, and it's just trying to come up with a branding style to kind of make it unique and everything. So I see where the client is coming from. We're the installers, so they're fabricating everything and kind of giving us the package. So we want to be able to come back to them with proper guidance and what can be removed and what could be approved. And hopefully this is something that we could do at staff level versus coming to the board and all of that. So
Sure, so, the logos on the fin, I've checked the size of them, they're not inappropriate, those logos, could fit. The colors of the logo are part of the branding, but right now the Holiday Inn has green and white logos on that fin. So I think that the logos as is would be appropriate. But you're more, signage is a struggle, and you're more comfortable, you're more familiar with some of the signs. Yeah.
So
I think the vinyl clings that are just solid white or solid color, we would not be comfortable approving.
and no color change to the actual fin itself, right? So no aspect of the
No
side
color.
or the front. Okay.
We wouldn't be
I
guilty.
just want to make sure I give that.
And no
information.
colors applied to the canopy, the underside of the canopy.
That's my biggest question is the canopy.
Okay.
Because I don't say the canopy to me is not signage,
Yeah.
even though it's using branded colors.
Yeah.
And I'm going to imagine that I'm going to guess that this is or could be considered a temporary installation as well. So
Yeah.
like even the color options that are below the doorways along the windows, is that correct? So I mean they're just vinyl additions.
It is vinyl graphics, and just like the fin itself is as well, it's all vinyl that could be removed, and it's
Because I agree on all the
appropriate.
signage, and I agree with the doors too, not being blocked for the visual part. But I think the canopy could potentially add in a neat element onto that. Otherwise, I don't want to say blasé, but blasé building.
It gets into a little bit of a gray area because that is not a signage area, as you mentioned. And it's not a sign in that there's no words on that canopy, but it is definitely branding. And the building itself, the canopy is pretty seamlessly integrated into that whole corner. It's very similar materials and stuff, so it's really more at that point of an temporary architectural alteration.
So to kind of extend that, nothing prevents anything from being applied to the inside of that glass.
Well,
And so nothing,
interestingly enough.
I'm just saying, nothing prevents a light that might illuminate that awning from the inside of the glass out. I guess I'm really anxious about as moving through, really anxious that we really pay attention to our sign ordinance and working out, this is a really cool detail because I didn't really think about the awning and illuminating of the awning not being a sign. I guess it's not, but it's certainly a branding.
Right.
And so really trying to be thoughtful as you're thinking through questions relative to the sign ordinance that we just passed. To make sure that we
I would say meeting with legal about this very issue, not this application at all, actually.
Yeah.
But
There's a lot
how,
of gray area in the signs in general, so it's
yeah.
It's
So how do you manage, like an HOA manages don't use vertical blinds? What is the extent of BAR purview on signs at the inside of a window? And it's really, well, legal seems to think that we do have it. It's the intent. What is the intent? Is it designed to draw you in, or is it designed as decor on the interior? So like on a side wall that you can see from a storefront, if there's a sign on that wall and the intent is to be read by the outside passerby to draw them in, we could have purview. But if it's just a neon sign that's decorative,
That's
then
really
it's not in our
interesting.
purview.
So
Well, but also there is in the ordinance a clause that says any signage that is visible from the right of way, regardless of where it exists within the space, if it is indeed visible from the right of way, it's signage under BAR purview.
So let's say, sorry for the hypothetical,
And this is complicated.
that FedEx
Signage every time.
that the FedEx at St. Philip and Calhoun has no signage. But in the window, they have the colors purple, white, and orange. Now, to me, that combination of three colors, I think of FedEx because they've done such a good job of branding it. I don't know I've never heard of the Element as a brand of Marriott. So, I mean, even though it is apparently a brand of them, I don't necessarily relate the two. So at what point do we consider colors of the brand, if it's recognizable or not? So like red and yellow combined together in a certain way to me would be McDonald's. Purple, orange, and white would be FedEx.
But it's also
These
on
random.
the sign and not on the.
No, I'm saying if it was not signage, if it was just the colors.
We would not.
I think there's two distinct elements at play here. One is what you're discussing is you've now exited the realm of signage and you've entered the realm of simply applying a color to a surface on the exterior of the building. The second thing deals with advertising. And this board has maintained that it's not interested in signage as advertising, but it is interested in signage as wayfind,
Right.
as describing where a business is.
Then having said that, I would think that the canopy is not considered signage.
Yeah,
Right.
I think to piggyback that, to me, similarly, there's a dichotomy here. Last summer, we reviewed a bar taco for King Street, and part of that application was to paint some trim elements blue. Bar taco is blue and white. That's
Right.
their logo with the blue dragonfly. So there was a piece of branding that became a color on the architectural feature. However, I just lost my train of thought. I think the difference here is that where that canopy is, in my opinion, it's an architectural feature that was designed in such a way to integrate seamlessly with the rest of the materials in the building.
And the colors have nothing to do with the building.
Right.
And with nothing.
And
It's enough colors in a limited saying enough there in that word.
And furthermore, the colors can't, by ordinance, be violently contrasting. They must be in keeping with the architectural aesthetics of the building. They can't be deemed lurid or garish. So, I mean, it's like pornography.
You know,
Yeah. That's right.
So here's another question. Sorry that I'm getting into this. They could do a lighting feature of the same lights that would then be considered appropriate.
That's different application.
Well, that's why I'm asking. So I mean,
No, not clear light.
Again, whatever we do to the doors, whatever we do to the canopies, has nothing to do with the signage. It's architecture.
Yeah, two separate elements. I agree. Mr. Panera, hopefully you found some of this educational, being able to inform your client kind of.
I think so. I mean, we would naturally receive some type of official letter to kind of piggyback on what we're interpreting, but
We will have the results with a lot of the sport comment in it that you can use.
Okay. Yeah, we don't expect you to have that.
well, we haven't voted
So-
yet either.
Yes, we
Yeah.
haven't closed it yet.
So I guess the question was, do they want to go back to us?
If it comes into us and it's something that is within our policies and our ordinance stuff that we can handle, then I would prefer that comes back to us.
So
Yeah.
it'll have to be in the
It would have to be
in the motion.
Well, I don't think so. I think what we're talking about, if I'm sensing the board's direction, is we're going to do it tonight.
Right.
The purpose of this exercise was to inform Mr. Panero with a relatively recent ordinance so he can go back to his clients and say, these are the parameters that you have to work with, since this is something that everybody is learning about, while at the same time this board not being prescriptive as to what you must do. So these are the parameters in which they come in. I think it's clear to Mr. Panero, and I thought I got from Lawrence and Tori, that when we're talking about the scope of 20%, the surface area covered, et cetera, now that all that's clear, it is possible that Mr. Panero's new submission would be taken care of by staff. Correct?
And the goal is as we move forward, many more of these things are taken care of the staff
Oh,
level
yeah.
based on the policy.
Right. As long as they're not painted in the corner. And that's why
Yeah.
we did this
Well,
tonight.
yeah.
Every time we have a conversation about this, gives a lot of guidance to staff.
Becomes clearer and clearer.
Thank
I
you.
think so.
Thank you.
So can I entertain a motion?
I would make a motion for denial with one step.
Incorporating the board's now. Please, thank you, Mr. Members. Is there a second?
Okay.
Ms. Sobchak, Mr. Brown, how do you vote on the motion?
Yeah, in favor.
Mr. Matters?
Yeah, you go.
Ms. Sobchak?
Yeah.
And myself, yay in favor. What I would say is that hopefully you find this useful, because I know you'll have other applicants who come in here. It's a relatively new ordinance. We're trying to help staff do their job and minimize the need for you to come in front of this board. And so hopefully you can work with this information in the iterative process as we develop this out to get a better product and satisfy your clients. Okay? We get it. We see it. We're seeing it all the time.
Are we on?
During
Adjourned at 8:19.
Very good.